You don't get to buy your way out of blood on your hands. Those 10 words, spoken in a crystal ballroom by a woman with no title and nothing to lose, just shattered the most powerful empire in the Northern Territories. What happens next? Stick around until the end. This is the kind of story that proves courage doesn't care about your last name. Drop a like, tell us what city you're watching from, and let's see if Elara Vance survives what she just started. The chandeliers in the Grandstone Hall dripped with enough crystal to fund a small village for a year. Elara knew this because she'd done the math 3 times while standing in the corner, watching gloved hands lift champagne flutes worth more than her father's monthly inventory. She shouldn't have come. Her dress was last season's silk, let out at the seams and re-dyed a deep emerald to hide the alterations. Her gloves had a tiny mend at the left thumb. In a room full of people who measured worth in bloodlines and bank accounts, Elara Vance was a merchant's daughter, playing dress-up, and everyone knew it. "Is that the Vance girl?" A woman's voice carried over the string quartet, not bothering to whisper. "I heard her father's business is circling the drain. Textiles, wasn't it? How quaint." Elara's jaw tightened. She focused on the champagne in her hand, watching bubbles rise in perfect, predictable patterns. Predictable. Unlike everything else tonight. The invitation had come as a surprise, a thick card with gilded edges delivered by a courier who looked confused to be knocking on their modest door. The annual Benefactors Gala, in honor of charitable works throughout the province. Her father had been cautious, her mother hopeful. Elara had been suspicious from the start. "Smile more, dear," her mother had said while fastening the garnet necklace, the only piece of real jewelry they hadn't sold. This could mean new connections, new opportunities. What it meant was humiliation wrapped in politeness. Elara had been here 40 minutes and had spoken to exactly 3 people. A waiter offering canapes, an elderly lord who'd mistaken her for someone else, and a young woman who'd asked if she was lost. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies stepped to the center of the marble floor, tapping a silver fork against his glass. "If I may have your attention, His Grace, Duke Adrian Hale, would like to say a few words about this year's charitable initiative." The room shifted, bodies angling toward the raised platform where the Duke stood. Elara had seen him only once before, from a distance, during a parade through the merchant district. Up close, Adrian Hale was exactly what you'd expect from old money and unchallenged power. Tall, perfectly tailored, with the kind of face that looked good on coins. Dark hair swept back, expression carefully neutral, eyes that assessed everything and revealed nothing. He smiled. The room smiled back. "Friends," Adrian began, his voice smooth and practiced, "we gather tonight not just to celebrate our successes, but to remember our duty to those less fortunate." Elara's fingers tightened around her glass. This year, the Hale Foundation has committed 200,000 crowns to the expansion of worker housing in the industrial quarter. We've heard the concerns about conditions, about safety, and I'm pleased to announce that we're taking action. Applause rippled through the ballroom. Genuine, enthusiastic applause. Elara felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd been to the industrial quarter. 3 weeks ago, when her father's best weaver had collapsed during a delivery, she'd helped carry him back to the tenement he shared with 11 other people. 5 floors, no windows, walls so thin you could hear the factory whistles through them. The whole building reeked of coal smoke and desperation. And she'd seen the Hale Company stamp on the factory gate, on the lease agreements posted in the halls, on the notices threatening eviction for late rent. "We believe," Adrian continued, "that prosperity shared is prosperity multiplied. Every worker housed is a worker who can contribute to our collective growth. Is that what you call it?" The words left Elara's mouth before she could stop them. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every head in the ballroom turned toward her. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his eyes. "I'm sorry, did you have a question?" Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "Smile, be polite, don't make waves." She stepped forward anyway. "You're expanding worker housing," she said, and her voice didn't shake, which felt like a small miracle. "The same housing where 16 people died in a fire last year because the exits were locked from the outside?" A gasp ran through the crowd. Adrian's smile never wavered. "That tragedy was thoroughly investigated. Faulty wiring was determined to be faulty wiring in a building your company owns and refused to maintain despite 7 formal complaints." Elara felt the words building now, pressure behind a dam that had been cracking for months. The same building where rent went up 30% this year while conditions got worse. Miss, Adrian paused, waiting. Vance. Elara Vance. Miss Vance. He said her name like he was tasting something bitter. I understand emotions run high on these topics, but perhaps a ballroom full of people trying to do good work isn't the appropriate venue for what? Truth? Elara took another step forward. Somewhere behind her, she heard her mother's horrified inhale. You're standing there accepting praise for throwing money at a problem you created. Your factories, your housing, your policies that squeeze every last coin out of people who break their backs to make you richer. The room was so quiet she could hear her own pulse. Adrian descended from the platform, moving with the casual grace of someone who'd never had to wonder if he belonged somewhere. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You have passion, he said quietly, and clearly you care about these issues. But you're young. You don't understand the complexities of running an enterprise that employs thousands. I understand that people are dying. Elara's voice cracked, raw and desperate. I understand that you call it charity when you build housing you'll charge rent for. I understand that you stand here in a room that costs more than most people earn in a lifetime and expect applause for basic human decency. Adrian's jaw tightened, the first real emotion she'd seen. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, and now there was steel beneath the polish. Then explain it to me. Elara spread her arms, aware that she was making a scene, that she was burning every bridge her family might have had. But she couldn't stop. The words had been building for too long. Explain how locking emergency exits saves money. Explain how raising rent in buildings with no heat is necessary. Explain how 16 dead workers is just the cost of business. That's enough. Adrian's voice cut like a blade. No. Elara stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. It's not nearly enough. You don't get to buy your way out of blood on your hands with a donation and a smile. You don't get to call exploitation charity and expect us to… Security, Adrian said calmly. Two men in dark suits materialized from the edges of the room. Miss Vance was just leaving, Adrian continued, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm sure she'll find her own way out. The hands on her arms were firm but not rough. Professional. The kind of handling reserved for problems that needed to disappear quietly. Elara didn't resist. What would be the point? But as they guided her toward the tall doors, she looked back at Adrian Hale one last time. He was already turning away, already smoothing his jacket, already preparing to continue his speech like she'd been nothing more than a brief interruption. The crowd parted for her like she carried plague. She caught fragments of whispered conversations. Absolutely mortifying. Who does she think she is? Vance family, you know, merchants. What can you expect? The doors closed behind her with a sound like a tomb ceiling. Elara stood in the entrance hall, breathing hard, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. The security guards had disappeared, their job done. Elara Marie Vance. Her mother's voice came from behind her, sharp with fury and fear. Elara turned. Her mother stood in the doorway, her face pale, her father beside her looking 10 years older than he had that morning. What have you done? Her mother whispered. Elara looked at her parents, good people, careful people, people who'd spent their lives playing by rules designed to keep them in their place, and felt something settle in her chest. What I had to, she said. Her father closed his eyes. We should go. The carriage ride home was silent except for the clatter of wheels on cobblestones. Elara sat across from her parents, watching the gas lamps slide past the window, each one a little beacon in the dark. Her mother stared at her hands. Her father stared at nothing. Finally, as they turned onto their street, her father spoke. Do you understand what you've done? Elara met his gaze. Yes. We're ruined. His voice was flat, drained. Whatever chance we had of rebuilding, of securing new contracts, of climbing out of this hole, you just buried it. He was lying, Elara said. Everyone in that room was applauding a lie. So you decided to tell the truth? Her mother's laugh was bitter. In front of the most powerful people in 3 provinces? You decided tonight was the night to play hero? I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was trying to… To what? Her mother's composure finally cracked. To save people who don't even know your name? To right the world's wrongs? We're merchants, Elara. We survive by being smart, by being careful, by knowing our place. And you just threw that all away for what? Pride? For principle, Elara shot back. Principle doesn't pay debts, her father said quietly. Principle doesn't keep food on the table. Principle is a luxury we can't afford. The carriage stopped. They climbed out in silence, entering their modest townhouse, 3 stories of aging brick in a neighborhood that used to be fashionable 20 years ago. Elara went straight to her room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of her bed. Her hands were still shaking. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Said the thing everyone was thinking but no one dared to voice. Challenged Adrian Hale in front of his entire world, and now she'd pay for it. The knock on her door came an hour later. "It's me," her father's voice, softer now. Elara opened the door. He stood there holding 2 cups of tea, his expression weary but no longer angry. "May I?" She stepped aside. They sat together at her small desk, the cups warm in their hands. "I'm not saying you were wrong," her father said finally. "About what you said, about the conditions, the deaths, the exploitation. You weren't wrong. But the world doesn't reward being right. It rewards being powerful. And we're not powerful, Elara. We're small. We're vulnerable. And now," he trailed off, staring into his tea. "Now we're targets," Elara finished. Her father nodded. Adrian Hale doesn't forgive public humiliation. He doesn't forget challenges to his authority. And he has resources we can't even imagine. He looked at her, and his eyes were sad. "I'm proud of your courage, daughter, but I'm terrified of what it's going to cost us." Elara wanted to argue, wanted to say it would be fine, that truth mattered, that standing up to injustice was worth any price. But she looked at her father's face and saw the fear there, real, rational fear, and the words died in her throat. "What do we do?" she asked instead. "We survive," he said, "however we can." The first blow came 3 days later. Elara was working in the back office, reviewing accounts that made her stomach hurt, when her father came in holding a letter. His hands trembled. "What is it?" He handed it to her without speaking. The letterhead was expensive paper, heavy stock with an embossed seal. The message was brief. "Due to unforeseen complications in our supply chain, we must regretfully terminate our contract with Vance Textiles, effective immediately. Please consider all outstanding orders canceled. Payment for delivered goods will be remitted within standard terms. Cordially, Hastings and Webb Manufacturing." Hastings and Webb was their largest client, had been for 8 years. "They're owned by the Hale Corporation," her father said. "Subsidiary of a subsidiary, but it all traces back." Elara felt cold. "All of it?" "I checked." Her father's voice was hollow. "Hastings, Webb, Cordovan Imports, Sterling, and Sons, everyone we do significant business with, either owned by Hale companies or dependent on Hale contracts." He sat down heavily. "He's cutting us off at the knees." The second letter arrived that afternoon, then a third, then a fourth. By week's end, Vance Textiles had lost 70% of its contracts. Elara watched her father age in days, watched her mother's hands develop a tremor from stress, watched the household staff, just 3 people, but they'd been with the family for years, receive quiet notices that they'd need to start looking for new positions. "It's not fair," Elara said one night at dinner, staring at the meager meal her mother had prepared. "They'd had to let the cook go." "No," her father agreed. "It's not." "So we just accept it? Let him destroy us?" Her mother set down her fork with a sharp click. "What choice do we have? Sue him? With what money? Challenge him? With what power? You already spoke your truth, Elara. This is what truth costs." The words hit like a slap. That night, alone in her room, Elara pulled out the society pages from the night of the gala. Someone had written about her outburst. Anonymously, of course. The tone was mocking. A merchant's daughter with delusions of relevance. Youthful passion unburdened by actual knowledge. Perhaps Miss Vance should focus on her father's failing business rather than critiquing her betters. She read it 3 times, feeling the anger build. Then she read the next article. Duke Adrian Hale announces expansion of charitable housing initiative. We must do better, says the Duke. Recent concerns have reminded us that prosperity means nothing if it's not shared. Elara crumpled the paper in her fists. He was using her outburst, turning it into fuel for his image, playing the magnanimous leader who listens to criticism and responds with grace, while quietly destroying her family. The knock on the front door came late, almost midnight. Elara heard her father's footsteps, heard the door open, heard the low murmur of voices. Then, "Elara, come down here." She descended the stairs to find her father standing with a man she didn't recognize. Middle-aged, nondescript clothing, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing it. "This gentleman has a message for you," her father said, his voice tight. The man handed her an envelope. Plain paper, no seal. "From a friend," he said. "Someone who saw what you did at the gala. Someone who thinks you might be interested in the truth about the Hale Empire." Elara opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address and a time. "Tomorrow night, in the warehouse district." "Who sent this?" she demanded. The man smiled. "Someone who's been waiting a long time for someone like you to come along." Then he was gone, disappearing into the night like smoke. Elara stood in the doorway, holding the mysterious note, aware of her father's presence beside her. "Don't go," he said quietly. "You don't know what it is." "I know it's dangerous. I know it's exactly the kind of thing that gets people hurt." He turned to face her. "You've already paid a price for your principles, Elara. Don't pay with your life." She looked at the address again. Warehouse 7, Dock District. Not a part of town where merchant daughters went after dark. "What if it's real?" she asked. "What if someone actually has evidence about what Hale's doing?" "Then let them take it to the authorities." "The authorities he probably owns?" Her father flinched. Elara folded the paper carefully. "I'm not going to be stupid about this, but I'm also not going to hide. Pride," her mother's voice came from the stairs, "is going to get you killed." "Maybe." Elara looked at her parents, good, careful people who'd played by the rules and were losing everything anyway. "But cowardice is going to get us all destroyed. At least this way we go down fighting." The next night, Elara stood outside Warehouse 7, listening to the sound of water lapping against the docks. She'd told herself she was being careful, had worn dark, practical clothes, had told her parents where she was going, had even borrowed her father's walking stick, heavy oak that could double as a weapon if needed. But standing there in the dark, watching shadows move between buildings, she felt the first real spike of fear. What if this was a trap? What if Hale had sent this message, luring her somewhere isolated where she could disappear without questions? Before she could talk herself out of it, the warehouse door creaked open. A woman stood in the doorway, older, maybe 50, with steel gray hair and the kind of practical clothing that spoke of someone who worked with their hands. "Elara Vance?" "Yes." "Come in, quickly." Elara stepped inside. The warehouse was mostly empty, lit by a few lanterns that cast wild shadows on the walls. But in the center, there was a table covered in papers. And standing around it were 5 other people, men and women, different ages, all watching her with expressions that mixed hope and suspicion. "Who are you?" Elara asked. The gray-haired woman smiled. "We're the people Adrian Hale tried to erase. We're the workers who asked questions, the managers who refused to falsify safety reports, the lawyers who tried to file complaints." She gestured to the papers. "We're the ones who know the truth, and we've been waiting for someone with access to his world to help us prove it." Elara stepped closer to the table. The papers were contracts, ledgers, correspondence. She picked up one at random, a safety inspection report marked pass for a building she recognized from the industrial quarter. Beside it was another report, different letterhead, marked fail, with a list of violations that made her stomach turn. "This is," she started. "Fraud," said a man with scarred hands. "That's the real report. This," he tapped the past inspection, "is what Hale's people filed with the city." Elara looked up at the group. "Why me? Why now?" "Because you're already a target," the gray-haired woman said bluntly. "Because you stood up to him in front of everyone, which means you can't be quietly bought off or threatened away. And because," she paused, "because sometimes it takes someone from their world to make them listen." I'm not from their world, Elara said. You were in that ballroom. That's closer than any of us will ever get. The woman's expression softened. Look, we know it's asking a lot. We know Hale's already hurting your family, but this, she gestured to the evidence, this could actually stop him. If the right people see it, if someone credible brings it forward. Elara looked at the papers spread across the table. Evidence of negligence, corruption, deaths that could have been prevented. All of it hidden behind charity galas and public relations. What do you need me to do? She asked. The gray-haired woman smiled. We need you to be exactly what you were at that gala. Brave, loud, and impossible to ignore. Over the next 2 weeks, Elara learned more about the Hale Empire than she'd ever wanted to know. She met with factory workers who showed her scars from preventable accidents.
Yes.
With widows whose husbands had died in fires or collapses that were ruled unfortunate incidents. With bookkeepers who'd been fired for questioning discrepancies in safety budgets. Every story added fuel to the fire burning in her chest, but it also made her target bigger. The harassment started small, letters pushed under their door, messages scrawled on their shop window. Keep quiet. Mind your business. Some things are bigger than you. Then it escalated. Elara came home one afternoon to find their front window broken, glass scattered across the floor. Nothing stolen, just destruction for destruction's sake. Her father reported it. The city guards took a statement and did nothing. They're trying to scare us, Elara said that night. It's working, her mother replied. But the gray-haired woman, Margaret, Elara had learned, had a plan. There's a hearing next month, she explained, spreading a newspaper on Elara's kitchen table. City Council reviewing labor regulations. Hale will be there, presenting his reform proposals. Let me guess, Elara said. Reforms that look good on paper but change nothing. Exactly. But it's also the one time when public testimony is required, meaning you could speak, present evidence. Make him answer questions in front of people who actually have the power to investigate. Elara's father, listening from the doorway, shook his head. They'll never let her speak. One word from Hale and she'll be barred from the building. Maybe, Margaret acknowledged, unless she has sponsorship from someone the council can't ignore. Who? Margaret smiled. There are people in this city who've been waiting for someone to challenge Hale. Not workers, not agitators. People with money and influence who've watched him consolidate power and didn't like it. They wouldn't move against him openly. Too risky. But if someone else made the first move, they'd back me? Elara asked. They might, if you're willing to take the risk. Elara looked at her father, at his tired face, his worried eyes. Thought about the business they were losing, the life they'd built crumbling around them. We're already ruined, she said quietly. What's left to lose? The sponsorship came from Lady Cassandra Thorne, a widow whose late husband had been one of Hale's early competitors before a series of unfortunate business setbacks had forced him to sell out. She was old money, old grudges, and she presented Elara's petition to the city council personally. They couldn't refuse without causing a scene. Elara spent the next 3 weeks preparing, memorizing facts, organizing evidence, practicing her testimony until the words felt burned into her brain. On the day of the hearing, she dressed carefully. Same green dress she'd worn to the gala, mended and pressed. The garnet necklace. Her mother's blessing, reluctant but real. Come back to us, her father said at the door. I will, Elara promised. The council chamber was packed. Elara sat in the back, watching Adrian Hale present his proposals with the same smooth confidence he'd shown at the gala. He was good at this, making exploitation sound like opportunity, making profit sound like progress. When her turn came to speak, the room went quiet. Elara walked to the front, set her portfolio on the podium, and looked directly at Adrian Hale. His expression was cold as winter. Council members, she began, I'm here to present evidence that Duke Hale's so-called reforms are built on a foundation of fraud, negligence, and deliberate harm. For the next 40 minutes, she laid it all out. Document by document, incident by incident. The falsified safety reports. The locked exits. The workers threatened into silence. The inspectors paid to look away. Adrian interrupted, but she could see the fury building behind his controlled expression. When she finished, the room was silent. Then one council member leaned forward. These are serious allegations, Miss Vance. Do you have proof? Elara opened her portfolio and began distributing copies of the evidence. Adrian finally spoke. These documents are fabricated. Clearly, Miss Vance has been manipulated by people with an agenda against legitimate business. Are you saying these safety violations didn't happen? Elara cut him off. That the 16 people who died in the warehouse fire were a lie? I'm saying that accidents happen in any enterprise. That tragedy is being exploited by their families, Elara's voice rose. By the workers who survived but lost limbs or sight or health? By the people you dismissed as acceptable losses? The room erupted. Council members started talking over each other. Reporters in the gallery began scribbling furiously. Adrian's lawyers demanded recesses and procedural reviews, but the evidence was out there now, public, undeniable. As the council called for order, Elara caught Adrian's gaze across the chamber. He mouthed 2 words. You'll pay. She mouthed back, worth it. The hearing ended without resolution. The council promised a full investigation. Adrian stormed out without speaking to anyone. Elara was swarmed by reporters, supporters, people who wanted to shake her hand or share their own stories of Hale's wrongdoing. Margaret found her in the chaos, gripped her shoulder. You did it, girl. You actually did it. Did what? Elara asked, exhausted. Made him angry? Put an even bigger target on my back? Started something he can't stop, Margaret said fiercely. The council can't ignore this now. Too public, too documented. You forced them to act. That night, Elara came home to find her parents waiting. Her mother was crying. Her father looked stunned. What happened? Elara asked, fear spiking. Her father handed her a letter. It was from the bank. Their mortgage, which they'd been struggling to pay, had been bought out by a new creditor. Payment in full was due within 30 days, or the property would be forfeit. The new creditor's name was listed at the bottom. Hale Holdings, LLC. He's taking our home, her mother whispered. Elara read the letter again, feeling the walls close in. She'd known there would be retaliation, had prepared for it, or thought she had. But this was different. This wasn't abstract economic pressure. This was personal. This was losing the house she'd grown up in, the business her father had built, everything her family had. We could fight it, her father said, but his voice had no conviction. With what? Her mother asked. We're barely keeping food on the table. We can't afford lawyers, can't afford to relocate, can't afford... She broke off, sobbing. Elara stood there, holding the letter, and felt something crack inside her. She'd thought she was strong enough for this, brave enough, smart enough. But she'd miscalculated, had underestimated how far Adrian Hale would go to destroy anyone who challenged him. And now her family was paying the price. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. Her father pulled her into a hug. Don't apologize for doing what's right. But as Elara stood there in her father's arms, listening to her mother cry, she wondered if being right was worth this much pain. The eviction notice came a week later. 30 days to vacate. Elara spent those days in a haze, helping pack up their lives into crates and trunks, watching movers carry away furniture that had been in her family for generations, saying goodbye to neighbors who tried to be supportive but couldn't quite hide their relief that it wasn't happening to them. On the last day, Elara stood in her empty bedroom and allowed herself one moment of grief. Then she locked it away and went downstairs. Her parents were waiting by the door, looking small and lost. Where do we go? Her mother asked. Elara had spent the last week finding an answer to that question. A small apartment in the merchant quarter, 3 rooms, no view, cheap, because it was above a tannery that made the whole building smell like leather and chemicals. It was all they could afford. They moved in silence, carrying what they could, leaving the rest behind. That night, in their cramped new home, Elara sat at the small window and watched the city lights. Somewhere out there, Adrian Hale was in his mansion, comfortable and untouched. And here she was, destroyed, but not defeated. Because the investigation was still happening. The evidence was still public. And people were still talking about the merchant's daughter who'd stood up to power. Her father found her at the window. You should rest, he said. Can't. Elara gestured to the street below. Tomorrow, Margaret wants me to meet with some of the families. They're organizing a formal complaint to the governor's office. Her father sighed. Elara, when is enough enough? She looked at him, really looked, saw the exhaustion, the fear, the cost of everything she'd put them through. I don't know, she admitted, but I know we can't stop now, not when we're so close. Close to what? His voice broke. We've lost everything. Not everything. Elara stood, faced him. We still have each other. We still have truth on our side. And Adrian Hale is scared, Father. You don't destroy someone this thoroughly unless you're afraid of what they might do. Her father studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was small and sad, but real. When did you get so stubborn? I learned from the best. The next morning, Elara woke to pounding on their door. She answered it to find 3 city guards standing in the hallway. Elara Vance? Yes? You're under arrest for defamation and inciting public unrest. The world tilted. On whose complaint? She demanded. The guard consulted his papers. Duke Adrian Hale has filed formal charges. You're to come with us immediately. Her father appeared behind her. She has rights. You can't just... Sir, please step aside. We have a warrant. They took her in chains. Actual chains, like she was some kind of dangerous criminal. The jail cell was cold and damp, smelling of mold and human misery. Elara sat on the narrow cot and tried to think. This was a power play. Adrian couldn't refute the evidence, so he was trying a different approach. Discredit her, paint her as a troublemaker, lock her away while his lawyers worked to bury the investigation. It might work. She'd been in the cell for 3 hours when the guard returned. You have a visitor. Elara expected Margaret, or maybe Lady Thorne's lawyer. Instead, Adrian Hale walked into the corridor outside her cell. He dismissed the guard with a gesture. They were alone. Comfortable? He asked, looking around the cell with distaste. Elara stood, gripping the bars. What do you want? To offer you a choice. Adrian stepped closer. Drop the accusations. Publicly recant your testimony. Apologize for the defamation. Or you stay here. Charges proceed. You are found guilty, which you will be, I'll make certain of it. You spend the next year in a cell like this while your family loses what little they have left. He paused. Or you can end this now. Walk away. I'll drop the charges, return your family's home, even restore some of your father's contracts. All you have to do is admit you were wrong. Elara stared at him, seeing the calculation in his eyes. He thought he'd won. Thought he'd finally broken her. No, she said. Adrian blinked. I'm sorry? I said no. I won't recant, won't apologize, won't give you the satisfaction of breaking me. His expression hardened. Then you're a fool. You'll lose everything. I already have. Elara smiled, and it felt fierce and wild. You took my home, my family's business, our reputation. What else is there? My freedom? Fine. Take it. But you can't take the truth. The evidence is public. The investigation is happening. And every day I spend in this cell is proof that you're exactly what I said you were. A tyrant who destroys anyone who challenges his power. Adrian's jaw worked. You think you're a hero. You're not. You're just another idealist who's about to learn that principles don't matter in the real world. Maybe. Elara pressed her face between the bars. But at least I'll know I tried. Can you say the same? When you're old and alone in your mansion built on blood and lies, will you be proud of what you've become? For just a moment, something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Something that might have been doubt. Then it was gone. Enjoy your cell, he said, and walked away. Elara sank back onto the cot, her bravery evaporating the moment he was gone. She'd just condemned herself. Possibly her family. For what? Truth? Justice? Some abstract principle that people like Adrian Hale would never understand? But even as the fear crept in, even as she faced the very real possibility of spending months or years in this cell, Elara felt something else. Relief. She'd made her choice, had drawn her line in the sand. Whatever came next, at least she'd know she hadn't backed down. The days blurred together, cold, dark, isolated. Elara was allowed no visitors except her lawyer, a young man provided by Lady Thorne, who looked increasingly worried every time he came. "The trial's set for next week," he said on the fifth day. "And I'll be honest, Miss Vance, it doesn't look good. Hale's lawyers are skilled, the judge is sympathetic to his position, and without you recanting, they're going to push for the maximum sentence." "How long?" 2 years. Elara closed her eyes. "And the investigation into Hale's companies?" The lawyer hesitated. "Stalled. Someone filed an injunction claiming the evidence was obtained illegally. It'll be months before it's resolved, if ever." So Adrian was winning on all fronts. "There is one thing," the lawyer added. "The story's getting attention. Newspapers are picking it up. Merchant's daughter arrested for speaking truth to power. That kind of angle. Some people are angry. There's talk of protests. Will it matter?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but it's something." That night, alone in her cell, Elara heard shouting from outside. She pulled herself up to the narrow window, peering through the bars. In the street below, a crowd had gathered, maybe 50 people, holding signs and torches. "Free Elara Vance. Truth is not a crime. Hale's blood money." Elara pressed her forehead against the cold bars and cried. Not from fear or sadness, but from something she couldn't quite name. They hadn't forgotten her. Even locked away, even facing defeat, she'd started something that was growing beyond her. The trial came and went in a blur of legal maneuvering and predetermined outcomes. Guilty on all charges. 18 months in prison. Elara stood as the judge read the sentence, her hand steady, her expression calm. She looked across the courtroom at Adrian Hale, sitting in the gallery with his perfect suit and his satisfied smile. And she smiled back, because outside the crowd had grown, the protests had spread. Other workers, other families, people who'd been afraid to speak were finding their voices. Adrian had won this battle, but the war was far from over. As the guards led her away, Elara caught Margaretta's eye in the crowd. The older woman nodded once. A promise. A commitment. "We'll keep fighting." Elara was taken back to her cell, which would be her home for the next year and a half. She sat on the cot, listening to the sounds of the prison around her, and thought about everything that had brought her here. A moment of defiance in a ballroom, a choice to speak truth when silence would have been safer, a refusal to back down even when the cost became unbearable. Had it been worth it? Elara didn't know yet, but she'd made her choice, and she'd live with it. Tomorrow, the fight would continue. Tonight, she'd rest. And somewhere in the city, in his gilded mansion, Adrian Hale was learning that destroying one voice doesn't silence a movement. It only makes it grow. Prison had a rhythm. Wake at dawn to the clang of bells, watery porridge that tasted like paste, hours in the yard where women circled like ghosts, eyes down, voices low. Then back to the cells before the sun set, leaving nothing but darkness and the sounds of other people's nightmares. Elara learned the rhythm in her first week. By the second, she was part of it. Her cellmate was a woman named Iris, 40-something, with tattoos on her knuckles and a scar that ran from her ear to her collarbone. She'd been a dock worker before getting caught stealing grain from a Hale warehouse. "Feeding my kids," Iris said the first night, matter of fact. "Warehouse had enough to feed half the city. Figured they wouldn't miss a sack or two." "How long are you in for?" 3 years. Iris lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling. "My youngest will be 9 when I get out. Won't even recognize me." Elara felt the weight of that settle in her chest. The other women knew who she was. Word traveled fast in prison. The merchant's daughter who'd challenged a duke and ended up in chains. Some looked at her with respect. Others with contempt. "You're the one stirring up trouble with the Hale family," a woman named Vera said in the yard one afternoon. She was tall, hard-faced, serving time for assault, making big speeches while the rest of us pay the price. "I'm paying too," Elara pointed out. Vera snorted. "For 18 months. Then what? You go back to your nice life, your merchant family, your pretty dresses. We're still here, still breaking our backs in his factories when we get out because there's nowhere else to work." "That's exactly why I spoke up." "No." Vera stepped closer. "You spoke up because it made you feel good, made you feel important. You didn't think about what happens after, how Hale cracks down harder on anyone who complains, how workers lose what little protection they had because some rich girl decided to play hero. The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. Elara had acted on principle, yes, But she'd also been angry, reckless, thinking more about being right than being effective. "I was trying to help," she said quietly. "Well, you didn't." Vera walked away. That night, Elara lay awake listening to Iris's breathing and thought about all the ways she'd failed. Her family, homeless and broke. The workers, facing increased scrutiny and retaliation. The investigation stalled indefinitely while Adrian Hale continued business as usual. Maybe her mother had been right. Maybe principal was a luxury they couldn't afford. The letter came 3 weeks into her sentence. A guard shoved it through the bars without comment. Plain envelope, no return address. Elara opened it with shaking hands. "They're burning the evidence. Margaret's apartment was raided 2 nights ago. Files seized, declared stolen property. The families you met with are being threatened. Lose their jobs or face charges for conspiracy. Lady Thorne's lawyer has withdrawn from the case. The governor's office returned our complaint unopened. Adrian Hale is erasing everything you built, and there's nothing we can do to stop him. I'm sorry. We tried. M." Elara read it twice, then 3 times. All of it. Gone. The evidence that had taken months to gather. The testimonies from families who'd risked everything to come forward. The network of people brave enough to challenge power. Dismantled in 3 weeks. "Bad news?" Iris asked from her cot. Elara couldn't speak. She just handed over the letter. Iris read it, her expression darkening. "That's Hale for you. Doesn't just beat you. Make sure you stay beaten." "I failed them," Elara whispered. "Probably." Iris handed back the letter. "But you tried. That's more than most people do." It wasn't comfort. It was just fact. Elara folded the letter carefully and tucked it under her mattress. Then she cried for the first time since her arrest. Quiet, bitter tears that changed nothing. The next morning, she woke to find Vera standing outside her cell. "You got visitors in the common room," Vera said. "I'm not allowed." "Special exception. Warden approved it." Vera's expression was unreadable. "Better go before he changes his mind." Elara followed the guard down corridors she'd never seen, into a room with 3 wooden tables and barred windows. Her parents sat at the middle table, looking smaller than she remembered. "Elara," her mother's voice broke. The guard unlocked Elara's wrist chains but left the ankle shackles. 10 minutes. Elara sat across from her parents and tried to find words. Her father spoke first. "We're leaving. The city, I mean. There's nothing left for us here." "Where will you go?" "Greymarch. Your mother's cousin has a shop there. He's willing to take us on, let us work for room and board until we get back on our feet." Her father's hands trembled slightly. "It's not what we had, but it's something." Greymarch was 6 days' journey north. A smaller city, colder, with fewer opportunities. "When?" Elara asked. "End of the week." "So soon." Her mother reached across the table, gripped Elara's hand. "Come with us. When you're released, I mean. Don't stay in this city. Don't keep fighting battles you can't win." "I have 16 months left." "I know, but after. Promise me you'll leave this behind. Find a quiet life somewhere Adrian Hale's shadow doesn't reach." Elara looked at her mother's face, saw the fear there, the exhaustion, the desperate hope that maybe, somewhere else, they could start over. "I promise," Elara lied. Her mother knew it was a lie, but she accepted it anyway, holding Elara's hand like she could keep her safe through sheer force of will. "We sold the last of the inventory," her father said, changing the subject. "Managed to clear some debts. It's not much, but we'll have enough to make the journey and settle in." "That's good." "Elara." Her father's voice dropped. "I need you to understand something. What you did, speaking out, standing up, it wasn't wrong. But it also wasn't enough. The world doesn't change because one person tells the truth. It changes when enough people decide the cost of silence is too high." "I know." "Do you?" He leaned forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, you threw yourself on a sword and expected it to matter. And now you're here, we're leaving, and Adrian Hale is still sleeping comfortably in his mansion." The words hurt because they were true. "Time's up," the guard announced. Her mother stood, tears streaming down her face. "I love you. Whatever happens, remember that." "I love you too." Her father embraced her awkwardly across the table. Be smart, daughter, not just brave. Then they were gone, escorted out by guards, and Elara was alone again. She sat in the empty room for a moment, processing. Her parents were leaving. The city that had been her whole world was rejecting her so thoroughly that even her family couldn't stay. And she was trapped here, powerless, while everything she'd fought for crumbled to dust. Back in her cell, Iris was waiting. Your folks? Yeah. They leaving? How did you? Everyone leaves eventually. Iris shrugged. The smart ones, anyway. This city chews people up. Your parents are smart to get out. Elara sat on her cot, feeling hollow. I had a brother, Iris said suddenly. Worked in one of Hale's textile mills, 12-hour shifts, terrible pay, but it was work. Then he started organizing, talking to other workers about forming a union, demanding better conditions. What happened? Factory caught fire one night. My brother was inside, working late. Doors were locked from the outside. Iris's voice was flat, emotionless. They said it was an accident, electrical fault, paid the families a pittance, and moved on. Elara felt cold. You think it was deliberate? I think people who threaten Adrian Hale's profits have a habit of dying in accidents. Iris met her eyes. You're lucky you only got prison. Means he thinks you're not a real threat. Just an annoying distraction. Great, Elara muttered. Could be worse. Iris lay back on her cot. Could be dead. That night, Elara dreamed of fire. The weeks crawled by. Elara fell into the rhythm of prison life. Work detail in the laundry, meals that tasted like nothing, hours in the yard walking in circles. She kept her head down, spoke little, tried not to think about the world outside. But news filtered in anyway. A guard mentioned that protests had died down. A new prisoner said the investigation into Hale's companies had been officially closed due to insufficient evidence. Someone else heard that Adrian Hale was being honored by the city council for his charitable contributions. Elara absorbed each piece of information like a blow. She'd failed. Completely, utterly failed. Stop wallowing, Iris said one night. It's pathetic. I'm not. You are. Sitting there feeling sorry for yourself because you didn't single-handedly bring down a corrupt empire. What did you expect? That one speech and some documents would topple a man who spent decades building power? I expected it to matter, Elara said. It did matter. Just not the way you wanted. Iris sat up. You know how many women in here talk about you? How many heard about the merchant's daughter who stood up to Hale and ended up in chains? You think that doesn't mean something? It means I'm an example. A warning about what happens when you challenge power. Or, Iris said, it means you proved it's possible to challenge him at all. Maybe you lost. But you showed people it could be done. Elara wanted to believe that, but it was hard when everything felt so thoroughly destroyed. The shift came in her 4th month. A new prisoner arrived, young woman, maybe 20, with burn scars covering half her face. Her name was Cora, and she'd worked in one of Hale's chemical refineries. Accident, she said flatly when someone asked about the scars. Vat of acid tipped over. Safety protocols said we should have had protective gear, ventilation, emergency wash stations. We had none of that. Did you report it? Elara asked. Cora laughed bitterly. Reported it to my supervisor. He reported me to management. They fired me for creating a hostile work environment. Then charged me with theft when I took my personal tools on my way out. That's insane. That's Hale. Cora looked at Elara with sharp recognition. You're the one who testified, aren't you, at the council hearing? For all the good it did. It did more than you think. Cora leaned closer, lowering her voice. Workers talk. They heard about what you said, about the evidence you presented. Most were too scared to act on it, but some weren't. There's organizing happening. Quiet, careful, but it's happening. Elara's heart skipped. What kind of organizing? Can't say too much, but there's a group, meeting in secret, planning something big. Cora glanced at the guard, then back. They sent me to find you, see if you'd be interested in helping when you get out. Helping how? They need someone who understands Hale's world, someone who's been inside those fancy rooms, who knows how the elite think, someone with nothing left to lose. Cora's scarred face was serious. That's you, isn't it? Elara thought about the 16 months she had left. about her parents in Greymarch, building a new life without her, about the promise she'd made to walk away. "Yes," she said. "That's me." Cora smiled. "Good. When you're out, go to the Copper Rose Tavern in the Dock District. Ask for Finn. He'll know you're coming." "How?" "Because I'll tell him." Cora stood. "Don't lose hope, Elara Vance. This isn't over." That night, Elara felt something she hadn't in months. Purpose. The organizing rumors spread through the prison like wildfire. Women who'd worked in Hale's factories, warehouses, refineries. They all had stories, all had scars, visible or otherwise. And they all started looking at Elara differently. Not as a failed hero, as someone who'd taken the first shot. "My sister still works at the mill," one woman said during yard time. "She says people are angry, not scared anymore." Angry. "Anger doesn't change anything," Vera pointed out. She'd been listening to these conversations with skepticism. Just gets people hurt. "Maybe," Elara said, "or maybe anger is what finally pushes people to act." Vera studied her. "You're planning something." "Not me. I'm locked up for another year." "But after?" Elara met her gaze. "After, I'm going to finish what I started." "And get yourself killed?" "Probably," Elara shrugged. "But at least I'll die trying instead of living broken." Vera was quiet for a moment. Then, "My daughter works in one of his garment factories, 10 years old, should be in school. Instead, she's stitching buttons 12 hours a day because we need the money." She looked at Elara. "If you're serious about fighting him, really serious, I might know people who can help." "I thought you said I was making things worse." "You were. Acting alone, making noise without a plan." Vera's expression hardened. "But if you're willing to do this right, organize properly, build something that lasts, then maybe you're not completely useless." It wasn't friendship. It was barely respect. But it was a start. Over the next weeks, Elara became the unofficial center of something she didn't quite understand yet. Women would approach her in the laundry, the yard, even in the meal line. They'd share information, which guards were sympathetic, which ones were on Hale's payroll, where protests were happening outside, which factories were close to striking. Iris watched it all with amusement. "You know what you're doing, right?" she asked one night. "Not really," Elara admitted. "You're becoming a symbol. That's dangerous." "Everything's dangerous." "True." Iris rolled over. "Just don't get yourself shanked before you get out. I'd miss the entertainment." The violence came in month 6. Elara was in the yard when 3 women surrounded her. She recognized 2 of them, both doing time for crimes connected to Hale businesses, both notably unfriendly since she'd arrived. "Heard you're organizing," the tallest one said. Her name was Ruth, and she had arms like tree trunks. "Just talking," Elara said carefully. "Talking gets people hurt." Ruth stepped closer. "My man works security for one of Hale's warehouses. Good job, steady pay. He hears there's trouble brewing, that workers are getting ideas about unions and strikes. You know what happens if they strike? They might get better conditions. They get fired, all of them. And my man loses his job too." Ruth's hand shot out, shoving Elara hard. "So you need to shut your mouth and stop filling people's heads with ideas that'll get them ruined." Elara stumbled back but didn't fall. "Hale's the one ruining people. I'm just—" The punch caught her in the ribs, driving the air from her lungs. She hit the ground hard. "You're just making it worse," Ruth said, standing over her. "For everyone." The other 2 women moved in, and Elara realized with cold clarity that this was going to be bad. Then Vera was there, stepping between them. "That's enough," Vera said. Ruth laughed. "Since when do you care about this one?" "Since I decided she might actually be useful instead of just loud." Vera cracked her knuckles. "You want to beat someone? Beat me. See how that works out." Ruth considered this. She outweighed Vera by 50 pounds and had a reputation for viciousness. But Vera had been here longer and had her own reputation. "This isn't over," Ruth finally said, backing off. "Hale's going to crush anyone stupid enough to follow her. And when he does, I want you to remember I warned you." She walked away, her companions following. Vera helped Elara to her feet. "You're going to get killed, you know that?" "Yeah." Elara touched her ribs, wincing. "Seems to be the consensus. And you're doing it anyway." Don't have much choice. Elara looked at Vera. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I just made enemies for you. Vera started walking. Better be worth it. That night, Iris examined Elara's bruises with professional detachment. Cracked rib, maybe. You'll live. She handed over a wet cloth. Ruth's connected. Her man feeds information to Hale's security. Means they know you're organizing in here. Great. Means you need to be more careful. Iris met her eyes. Or give up entirely. Elara pressed the cloth to her side, feeling the sharp ache. I'm not giving up. Figured. Iris lay back. Just try not to die before you do something worthwhile. The letter from her mother arrived the next week. Dearest Elara, we've settled in Greymarch. The work is hard but honest. Your father's cousin is kind, though his shop is struggling like everyone else's. I think about you every day. Wonder if you're safe, if you're eating enough, if you've thought about what comes after. Please, when you're released, come north. Leave that city behind. Leave the fighting and the anger and the impossible battles. We can make a new life here. Simple, quiet, safe. I know you think you owe something to the people you spoke up for, but you've already paid more than anyone should have to. You've sacrificed enough. Come home to us. Mother Elara read it 3 times, feeling the pull of it. A simple life, safety, family, everything she'd lost. She tucked the letter under her mattress next to Margaret's and tried not to think about the choice waiting for her. Month 8 brought news that changed everything. A new prisoner, a woman named Hannah, who'd worked as a clerk in one of Hale's accounting offices, arrived with information that spread through the prison like electricity. There's going to be an inspection, Hannah told anyone who'd listen. Provincial inspector sent by the capital, looking into labor conditions across all Hale properties. Why? Elara asked when she heard. Hannah pulled her aside in the yard. Because someone at the capital level got hold of your testimony from the council hearing, someone with power, and they're asking questions Hale can't dodge. Who? Don't know, but they're sending Inspector General Nathaniel Cross. He's got a reputation, can't be bought, doesn't play politics. If he finds violations, Hale can't make them disappear. Elara's mind raced. When? 3 months, maybe 4, after Elara was released. What happens if he finds evidence? Elara asked. Fines? Mandatory reforms? If it's bad enough, criminal charges. Hannah's expression was grim. But that's if. Hale's had months to clean things up, hide the worst of it, unless someone who knows where all the bodies are buried helps Cross look in the right places. Elara understood immediately. Someone like me? You testified once. You know the facilities, the patterns, and you've got nothing to lose. Hannah gripped her arm. The people organizing outside, Finn and his group, they're planning to coordinate with Cross's inspection, make noise, draw attention, force Hale to defend multiple fronts at once. But they need someone who can guide Cross to the evidence that matters. I'm not out for 4 more months. I know, but when you are, you need to be ready. Hannah glanced around, lowered her voice. This is it, Elara. The real chance to hurt him. Don't waste it. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. 4 months until release. Then what? Go to Greymarch and live quietly, or dive back into the fight with even higher stakes? You're thinking loud, Iris complained from her cot. Sorry. What's the dilemma? Elara told her about the inspection, the opportunity, the choice. Iris listened in silence. Then, you know what's going to happen if you do this, right? Hale will come after you harder than before. Won't be satisfied with just prison next time. I know. And you're going to do it anyway. I have to. No, you don't. Iris sat up. You could walk away, live. Let someone else fight this battle. There is no one else, Elara said. Or if there is, they're too scared or too broken or too dead. I'm the one who started this. I have to finish it. Iris was quiet for a long moment. My brother, she said finally, before he died in that fire, he told me something. Said the only difference between a hero and a fool is whether they win. Which am I? Don't know yet. Iris lay back down. But I hope you're the first. The final months crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elara counted days, then hours. She exercised obsessively, keeping her body strong. She memorized every piece of information the other prisoners shared about Hale's operations, which facilities were the worst, which managers were the most corrupt, where the real horrors were hidden. She prepared. Vera approached her 1 week before release. "My daughter," she said without preamble. "She's still at that factory, still 10 years old, still working instead of learning." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Do something." Vera handed her a scrap of paper with an address. "When you get out, go there. My sister will help you. She knows people, has connections to the organizers." "Why help me?" "Because I'm sick of watching my child break her back for a man who sees her as disposable." Vera's expression was fierce. "Make it count, Vance. Make all of this worth something." On her last day, Iris gave her a gift, a small knife, crude but sharp, wrapped in cloth. "Where did you get this?" Elara asked. "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to." Iris smiled. "Just take it. World's dangerous for women who make enemies of powerful men." Elara hugged her, surprising them both. "Don't get mushy," Iris muttered. "Just don't die, all right?" "I'll try." The prison gates opened at dawn. Elara walked out into cold morning air, breathing freedom for the first time in 10 months. No one was waiting for her. No family, no friends, just the city stretching out before her, dangerous and full of possibility. She had the address Vera gave her in one pocket, the knife Iris gave her in the other, and 4 months to prepare for the fight that would determine everything. Elara started walking. The city looked different after 10 months away. Dirtier, maybe? Or maybe she just saw it more clearly now. She went to Vera's sister's address first, a cramped apartment above a butcher's shop in the merchant quarter. The woman who answered the door was younger than Vera, but had the same hard eyes. "You're Elara." "Yes." "Come in, quickly." Inside, 3 other people waited. 2 men, 1 woman, all with the look of people who'd worked hard their whole lives and had little to show for it. "This is Finn," Vera's sister said, pointing to the older man. "He's running the organizing effort." Finn studied Elara with frank assessment. "Cora said you'd be willing to help." "I am." "Even knowing it could get you killed?" "Already tried to kill me once," Elara said. "Didn't take." Finn smiled grimly. "Good, because we need someone fearless and probably a little crazy. The inspection's in 12 weeks. We're planning coordinated actions across 6 facilities, protests, work stoppages, media attention, but the inspector needs to see the worst violations, the ones Hale's trying to hide." "I know where they are," Elara said. "Can you get us in?" "Maybe, if we're smart about it." "Smart's good." Finn leaned forward. "But we also need to be ready for Hale to fight back. He's not going to let this inspection happen without interference. We need contingencies, backup plans, people ready to document everything in case—" The door burst open. 3 men in dark suits stormed in, and Elara recognized the one in front, head of security from Adrian Hale's estate. "Elara Vance," he said, "you're coming with us." "On what authority?" Finn demanded. "On the authority of Duke Hale's restraining order. Miss Vance is forbidden from associating with known agitators or entering within 500 yards of any Hale property." He smiled coldly. "This meeting constitutes a violation." "That's insane. Take it up with the magistrate." The guard grabbed Elara's arm. "You're under arrest for violation of release terms." Elara looked at Finn, saw the calculation in his eyes. This was a setup. They'd been waiting for her to surface, ready to drag her back before she could cause more trouble. "Let her go," Vera's sister said, stepping forward. The guard's hand moved to his belt, where a club hung. "Don't make this worse," he said. Elara met Finn's gaze one more time, saw the question there. Fight or fold? She made her choice. Elara drove her elbow back into the guard's stomach, broke his grip, and ran for the door. "Stop her!" the guard shouted, but Finn and the others moved to block the exit, buying her seconds. Elara burst into the street, running blind, hearing shouts behind her. She didn't know where she was going, didn't have a plan, just knew she couldn't go back to that cell, couldn't let Adrian Hale win again. The chase was on, and Elara Vance was out of options. Elara's boots slapped against wet cobblestones as she tore through the narrow streets of the merchant quarter. Behind her, shouts echoed off brick walls, getting closer. She ducked into an alley, pressed herself against the wall, gasping for air. Her lungs burned. Prison had kept her alive but not fit. 10 months of limited movement had cost her. Footsteps pounded past the alley entrance. Elara waited, counting heartbeats, then moved in the opposite direction. She needed to lose them completely, needed to disappear into a city that suddenly felt full of eyes. The docks. That's where she'd go. Easier to vanish among the warehouses and loading cranes, among people who knew how to mind their own business. She emerged onto a broader street, trying to look casual despite her racing pulse. A woman carrying groceries gave her a curious glance. Elara forced herself to slow down, to breathe normally. 2 blocks? 3? The smell of fish and salt water grew stronger. Then a hand clamped onto her shoulder. Elara spun, reaching for Iris's knife, but stopped when she saw who'd grabbed her. A young woman, maybe 17, with paint-stained fingers and sharp green eyes. "You're Elara Vance," the girl said. Not a question. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. And Hale's men are 2 streets over, working a grid pattern." The girl tugged her toward a narrow doorway. "Come on, unless you want to go back to prison." Elara hesitated for exactly 1 second, then followed. The doorway led to a cramped print shop, the air thick with ink and paper dust. Old presses lined the walls, and a man with spectacles looked up from typesetting, his expression alarmed. "Clara, what?" "She needs to hide. Now." The girl, Clara, pushed Elara toward a back room. "Hale's dogs are hunting." The printer's alarm shifted to understanding. "The storage room, behind the paper stacks." Clara shoved Elara into a windowless space packed floor to ceiling with newsprint and blank stock. "Get down! Don't move! Don't make a sound!" Elara crouched between towering piles of paper, her heart still hammering. Minutes passed, then voices at the front of the shop. "We're looking for a fugitive. Young woman, dark hair, about this tall?" "Haven't seen anyone," the printer said calmly. "Been working alone all morning." "You sure about that? Because we have witnesses who saw someone matching her description heading this way." "Must have kept going. Street's busy this time of day." A long pause. Elara held her breath. "We'll be back," the guard said finally. "You see her? You report it. Understand?" "Of course." Footsteps retreated. The door closed. Elara stayed frozen for another 5 minutes before Clara appeared. "They're gone. For now." Clara studied her with unnerving intensity. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Elara admitted, standing. Her legs shook. "I'm Clara Webb. This is my uncle's shop." She gestured to the printer, who'd returned to his work. "We print pamphlets, news sheets, things the official papers won't touch." Understanding clicked. "You're part of the organizing." "Adjacent to it." Clara pulled out a worn copy of a pamphlet, handed it to Elara. "Recognize this?" It was a transcript of Elara's counsel testimony, printed in cheap ink, distributed who knows where. "We've been circulating your words for months," Clara said. "Workers read them, pass them around. Some factories, they're like scripture, proof that someone said it out loud." Elara stared at the pamphlet, feeling something twist in her chest. "I thought it was buried, that Hale had erased everything. He tried, but words are harder to kill than people." Clara's smile was fierce. "You started something, Elara Vance. Question is, you going to finish it, or let Hale run you to ground like a rabbit?" The printer spoke up without looking away from his work. "Girl's got a point. You ran from his guards, which means you violated your release. They'll be watching your family's old address, the boarding houses, anywhere you might go. You're a fugitive now." "I know." "So what's your plan?" Clara asked. Elara thought about Finn, about the inspection 12 weeks away, about all the people counting on her to be more than just a symbol. "I need to get to the Copper Rose Tavern. The organizers are—" "Already raided," the printer interrupted. "Happened an hour ago, right after you were arrested. Hale's men swept through, took everyone they could find." Elara's stomach dropped. "Finn?" "Gone, along with a dozen others." Clara's expression darkened. "Hale knew exactly where to hit, which means someone talked, or he's got people embedded in the organizing efforts. Or both." Elara pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to think through the panic. "The inspection. Inspector Cross, that's still happening, right?" "Far as we know. But without Finn's network coordinating, without people ready to guide Cross to the violations," Clara shrugged, He could inspect for months and find nothing. Hale's too good at hiding his tracks.
Then we make him visible, Elara said.
How?
Elara looked at the printing press, at the pamphlet stacked in corners, at Clara's expectant face.
You print the truth. I'll get you the evidence to print.
Clara's eyes widened.
You're talking about breaking into Hale properties.
I'm talking about doing what I should have done a year ago. Not just testifying, not just talking, actually exposing what he's hiding. The printer finally looked up. That's suicide.
Maybe.
Elara met his gaze. But it's the only play I have left. Clara was quiet for a moment, then, Uncle Thomas, didn't you say you had business in the industrial quarter tomorrow? Thomas removed his spectacles, cleaned them slowly. I might have deliveries to make, might need an assistant to carry the heavy loads. And I, Claire said, might know which facilities keep the worst records where the worst violations happen. Cousin who works maintenance at the chemical refinery.
He's been documenting safety failures for 2 years, waiting for someone who'd actually do something with the information.
Elara looked between them.
Why are you helping me?
Because my father worked for Hale, Clara said simply. Died when a scaffolding collapsed. Company called it operator error, paid my mother 50 crowns and moved on. Her voice hardened. I was 9 years old. I've been waiting 13 years for someone to make Hale pay for what he's done. You're that someone. Thomas put his spectacles back on. You'll need somewhere to stay. Can't go anywhere Hale's men might look. The print shop. Too obvious. They'll come back. Thomas thought for a moment. But I know a boarding house. Owner's sympathetic, doesn't ask questions. I don't have money. Neither did the last 3 fugitives we hid there, Clara said. Come on, we'll get you settled, then start planning. The boarding house was in the factory district, wedged between a tannery and a grain warehouse. The smell alone would keep most people away. The owner was a woman called Margot, maybe 60, with the weathered face of someone who'd survived too much to be shocked by anything. She's got Hale's dogs after her, Clara said by way of introduction. Margot looked Elara up and down. You the one from the trial? Yes? Good. About time someone made him uncomfortable. She handed Elara a key. 3rd floor, end of the hall, door locks from inside. Anyone comes asking, I haven't seen you. The room was barely larger than her prison cell. A cot, a wash basin, a window that overlooked an alley full of trash. But it was private, and it was safe. For now. Clara sat on the edge of the cot. My cousin Marcus finishes his shift at the refinery at 8 tonight. I can bring him here, let you two talk. What about the other facilities, the factories, the warehouses? I'll ask around, quietly. Clara stood. But Elara, you need to understand what you're walking into. Hale's security is everywhere. Cameras, guards, informants. Getting evidence is one thing, getting out alive is another. I know. Do you? Clara's expression was hard. Because a lot of people have tried to take down Adrian Hale. They're all either dead, ruined, or too scared to try again. What makes you different? Elara thought about that, about her family driven from their home, about Iris and Vera and all the women in that prison, about 16 bodies in a warehouse fire and a 10-year-old girl stitching buttons until her fingers bled. I've already lost everything, she said. That makes me dangerous. Claire smiled. Good answer. Marcus arrived at 9, 3 hours late and visibly nervous. He was thin, early 20s, with chemical burns scarring his forearms. This is insane, he said when Clara explained what Elara wanted. You're asking me to help you break into the refinery. I'm asking you to help me expose the conditions that gave you those scars, Elara said. Marcus looked at his arms, at the mottled skin. I was sprayed with solvent 6 months ago. Hose burst, no safety valve. Spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Company doctor said it was my fault for standing too close. Was it? I was doing my job exactly how they trained me. The equipment was faulty, had been for months. We reported it 12 times. His voice cracked. They did nothing. Said repairs were scheduled, but they never happened, so the hose burst and I got this. He gestured to his scars. Could have been worse. Could have been acid. Elara leaned forward. You said you've been documenting violations. Marcus pulled a folded notebook from his jacket. Everything. Every near miss, every ignored complaint, every piece of equipment that should have been replaced years ago. He handed it to her. I was going to give it to the inspector when he came, but with Finn arrested, I don't know who to trust anymore. Elara opened the notebook, page after page of dates, incidents, names, a catalog of negligence. This is exactly what we need, she said, but we need more. Photos, physical evidence, something undeniable. The refinery keeps incident reports in the supervisor's office. Locked cabinet, second floor. Marcus was sweating now. If you could get those, cross-reference them with what actually got reported to the safety board, it would prove they're falsifying records, Clara finished. Can you get me in? Elara asked Marcus. Maybe. There's a shift change at 6 in the morning. Chaos for about 20 minutes while night crew leaves and day crew arrives. If you had a worker's smock and kept your head down. He shook his head. But the supervisor's office is locked. And even if you got in, security does random sweeps. I'll be fast. You'll be caught, Marcus said flatly. And then you'll disappear. That's what happens to people who cross Hale on his own property. Then we make sure I don't get caught. Elara looked at Clara. You said your uncle makes deliveries? Paper and ink to the factories, picks up used goods for recycling. So a delivery van wouldn't be suspicious. Clara's eyes lit up. We could get you in and out during the shift change. Marcus creates a distraction, you grab the files, we're gone before anyone notices. That's still a dozen ways it could go wrong, Marcus protested. Yeah. Elara stood. But it's also the only plan we've got. They spent the next 3 hours working out details. Thomas would drive the van, posing as a normal delivery. Clara would wait at a rendezvous point 2 blocks away with forged worker credentials in case they needed a backup plan. Marcus would cause a minor accident in the mixing room. Nothing dangerous, just enough commotion to pull security's attention. Elara would have approximately 8 minutes to get to the supervisor's office, break into the cabinet, photograph the files with the camera Clara borrowed from her journalist friend, and get back to the van. 8 minutes to steal evidence that could finally expose Adrian Hale. What about after? Marcus asked. Even if this works, Hale will know someone broke in. He'll lock everything down tighter. That's why we hit multiple locations in the same week, Elara said. Overwhelm his ability to respond. He can't secure everything at once. You're talking about a coordinated assault on Hale's entire operation. Clara looked equal parts terrified and exhilarated. That requires people, resources, organization. Then we build it. Elara pulled out the address Vera had given her. I was supposed to connect with the organizers. They're scattered now, but they're not gone. We find them. We recruit. We move fast before Hale realizes what's happening. Marcus rubbed his face. This is crazy. Probably, Elara agreed. You in? He looked at his scarred arms again. My little brother starts at the refinery next month. He's 14. If I don't do something, he'll end up like me. Or worse. Is that a yes? That's a yes. The refinery operation was set for 3 days later. Elara spent those days moving through the city like a ghost, meeting with the scattered remains of Finn's network. Most were too scared to act. Some were angry enough to try anyway. A factory worker named James who'd lost 2 fingers to a faulty machine. A warehouse supervisor named Anna who'd been fired for reporting safety violations. A transit worker named Paul whose sister had died in one of Hale's textile mills. They met in basements and back rooms, always moving, always watching for Hale's security. We've got maybe 20 people willing to act, Anna reported on the second day. Not enough for what you're planning. It'll have to be enough. Elara spread a map across the table. Industrial district, warehouse quarter, refinery complex. We hit 3 locations simultaneously. Refinery, main warehouse, textile mill. Get evidence from all 3, document everything, get it to Inspector Cross and the press before Hale can spin the narrative. And if we get caught, James asked, then we go down fighting, Elara said simply. But we make enough noise that people hear us. Paul shook his head. Hale's going to crush us. He's going to try. Elara met each of their eyes. But here's what he doesn't understand. We're not doing this because we think we'll win. We're doing this because staying silent is worse than dying. The room was quiet. Then Anna spoke. My brother worked for Hale, 23 years old, died when a crane cable snapped because maintenance was 2 years behind schedule. Her voice was steady, cold.
I'm in. Me too, James said. One by one, they committed. The morning of the refinery operation, Elara woke before dawn. She dressed in the worker's smock Marcus had stolen, pulled her hair back, tried to look like she belonged. Thomas picked her up in the delivery van at 5:30. Neither of them spoke during the drive. The refinery loomed against the gray morning sky, a maze of pipes and smokestacks already belching dark clouds into the air. Elara's stomach churned. You don't have to do this, Thomas said quietly. Yeah, I do. They pulled up to the delivery entrance. A guard waved them through without really looking. Inside, the refinery was loud, hot, oppressive. Chemical smell burned Elara's nose. Workers moved through the space like automatons, heads down, focused on survival. Marcus appeared, gave her a tight nod. 6 minutes, he mouthed, then disappeared toward the mixing room. Elara waited. Then, from across the facility, a crash. Shouting, alarms. Security rushed past her toward the commotion. Elara moved. The supervisor's office was exactly where Marcus said it would be. The lock was cheap. Iris's knife made short work of it. Inside, the filing cabinet was locked too. Elara jimmied it open, hand shaking. There. Incident reports, hundreds of them. She pulled out the camera, started photographing. Page after page, clicking as fast as she could. 4 minutes. 5. Footsteps in the hallway. Elara froze. The footsteps passed. She kept shooting. Her hands were slick with sweat. 7 minutes. She shoved the files back, closed the cabinet, slipped out of the office. The hallway was empty. She walked quickly but not too quickly toward the delivery entrance. Almost there. You. Elara's blood went cold. A security guard, different from the ones who'd rushed to the mixing room. He was looking right at her. Don't recognize you. Show me your badge. Elara's mind raced. Left it in my locker. Nobody works here without a badge. He reached for his radio. We've got an unauthorized... Elara ran. Behind her, the guard shouted, more footsteps, closing fast. She burst through the delivery entrance, saw Thomas in the van, engine running. Go, she screamed, diving into the back. Thomas floored it. The van lurched forward, tires squealing. Behind them, guards poured out of the refinery. Did you get it? Thomas asked, weaving through traffic. Elara clutched the camera. Yeah. Then hold on. They made it 4 blocks before the security vehicle appeared behind them. Black sedan, powerful engine, gaining fast. Thomas cursed, took a hard right into an alley. The sedan followed. Elara braced herself as they careened through narrow streets, bouncing over potholes, scattering pedestrians. They're going to catch us, Thomas said. No, they're not. Elara pulled out her knife. When I say hit the brakes. What? Just do it. The sedan was right behind them now, close enough that Elara could see the driver's face. Now! Thomas slammed the brakes. The sedan, going too fast to stop, crashed into their rear bumper. Metal screamed. The van spun. Elara was thrown against the wall, head cracking hard. Stars exploded across her vision. When her sight cleared, they were stopped in the middle of an intersection. The sedan was crumpled against a lamppost, driver slumped over the wheel. You okay? Thomas asked. Drive, Elara gasped. They limped away, the van's rear axle damaged but still moving. By the time Hale's men organized pursuit, they ditched the van and disappeared into the morning crowd. Clara met them at the rendezvous point, face pale. That was supposed to be quiet, she said. Plans change. Elara handed her the camera. Get this to your uncle. Develop the photos. We need copies distributed before Hale knows what we have. He already knows something happened. The refinery's locked down. Good. Let him sweat. Elara's head throbbed where she'd hit it. What about the other teams? Claire's expression darkened. Warehouse team got in and out clean. Textile mill... She paused. They were caught. 3 people arrested. Elara felt the news like a physical blow. Who? Anna, James, someone named Terrence. 3 people in custody because of her plan. We can't stop, Clara said, reading her face. Not now. We've got evidence from 2 facilities. That's more than anyone's ever gotten before. It's not enough. Then what is? Elara thought about Inspector Cross, about the coordination Finn had been planning.
about 12 weeks that had now become 8. I need to talk to the inspector directly, make sure he knows where to look, what to look for. He's not in the city yet, won't arrive for another 6 weeks. Then I'll go to him. Elara stood, ignoring the pain in her head. Where's he based? The capital, 3 days' journey. Get me on a coach. Clara stared at her. You're a fugitive.
Hale's men are looking for you. The second you try to leave the city,
I'll be careful.
Careful doesn't cut it anymore. Clara's voice rose. You just escaped a high-speed chase. You're bleeding from your head. And you want to walk into the capital where Hale has even more influence? I want to finish this, Elara said. And I can't do it hiding in boarding houses, stealing evidence one facility at a time. I need institutional power on my side. I need Cross to understand this isn't just about labor violations. It's about systematic corruption that goes all the way up. Thomas, who'd been silent, finally spoke. She's right. We can document violations all day, but without someone with authority willing to act, it's just paper. Clara looked between them, then sighed. Fine, but you're not taking a public coach. Too exposed. She thought for a moment. I know someone. Runs goods between here and the capital. He might take a passenger, no questions asked. When? Tonight, if I can arrange it. Clara gripped Elara's arm. But once you're gone, we're on our own here. If Hale retaliates, if more people get arrested, keep gathering evidence. Keep distributing what we find. Make enough noise that he can't silence everyone. Elara's jaw set. And if I don't come back, make sure the inspector sees everything we've collected. That night, Elara stood in a warehouse at the edge of the city, waiting for a man named Garrett, who supposedly transported sensitive cargo to the capital. He arrived late, driving a wagon loaded with crates marked agricultural supplies. You're the fugitive, he said, looking her over. You're the smuggler. He grunted. 100 crowns to the capital, cash up front. I don't have 100 crowns, don't have 10. Garrett started to turn away. Wait. Elara pulled out the camera. I've got something better. Photographs of Hale's labor violations. Safety reports he's been falsifying. Evidence worth a lot more than 100 crowns to the right people. I don't traffic in information. You traffic in whatever makes money. Elara stepped closer. These photos brought to the right newspaper, the right reform group. They'd pay thousands. And all you have to do is get me to the capital. Garrett studied her, calculation in his eyes. Half the photos now, he said. Half when we arrive, and you ride in the cargo area. Anyone stops us, your cargo too. It wasn't a good deal, but it was the only one she had. Done. The journey to the capital was 3 days of cramped darkness, rattling over bad roads, breathing through gaps in the crates. Garrett stopped once a day to let her out, feed her stale bread and water, then lock her back in. On the second day they were stopped at a checkpoint. Elara heard voices muffled through wood. What's your business? Delivering supplies. Got paperwork right here. A pause. These crates sealed? Everything's in order. Footsteps circled the wagon. Elara held her breath. We're looking for a fugitive. Young woman, wanted for violations of release terms. You seen anyone matching this description? Garrett's answer was smooth. Haven't picked up any passengers, just me and my cargo. Mind if we check? Elara's heart stopped. Be my guest. But if you break the seals, I'm not liable for damage to the goods. Another pause. What kind of goods? Chemicals? Fertilizer components? Volatile if exposed to air? A lie. The crates held mostly fabric and tinned food. Fine. Move along. The wagon lurched forward. Elara exhaled shakily. They reached the capital on the afternoon of the third day. Garrett led her out in an alley behind a market, handed her a scrap of paper. Inspector Cross keeps offices in the Justice Ministry. 3rd floor, East Wing. He held out his hand. Photos. Elara gave him half the stack, as promised. Pleasure doing business, Garrett said, then drove away. Elara stood in the alley, filthy and exhausted, staring at the paper in her hand. The Justice Ministry was across the city, and she had no idea if Inspector Cross would even see her. But she'd come this far. The ministry building was imposing, white stone, columns, guards at every entrance. Elara cleaned herself up as best she could in a public fountain, then approached the main entrance. I need to see Inspector General Cross, she told the guard. Do you have an appointment? No, but no appointment, no entry. This is urgent. It's about the labor investigation in... You can file a formal request through the administrative office. Processing time is 2 to 3 weeks. Elara wanted to scream. I don't have 2 weeks. Inspector Cross needs to see this evidence before he arrives at... Miss, you need to step aside. 2 more guards were approaching. Elara recognized the look in their eyes. They'd been told to watch for someone matching her description. She backed away slowly. I'll come back with an appointment. You do that. Elara turned and walked away, feeling eyes on her back. So much for the direct approach. She found a boarding house that took the last of the money Clara had given her, then sat in the small room trying to think. Inspector Cross was here, somewhere in this city, but he was also protected by bureaucracy and security that she couldn't penetrate. Unless... Elara pulled out the remaining photographs. Evidence of falsified safety reports, documented violations, proof of systemic corruption. She needed someone who could get these to Cross, someone with access, with credibility, with reason to care. Someone like the journalists who'd covered her trial. The capital had 3 major newspapers. The Herald was establishment, wouldn't touch anything controversial. The Tribune was sensationalist, might publish but without credibility. The Standard was independent, respected, known for investigative work. Elara found their offices the next morning. The building was smaller than she expected, but busy. People moved in and out constantly, reporters, editors, messengers. She waited outside for an hour, watching, until she saw someone who looked promising. Older man, notebooks under his arm, the ink-stained fingers of a working journalist. Excuse me, Elara said, approaching. He barely glanced at her. Not interested in whatever you're selling. I'm not selling anything. I'm offering a story about Adrian Hale and systematic labor exploitation. Now he looked at her, really looked. You're the Vance girl, the one who testified at the council hearing. Yes. You're also wanted for violating your release terms. Also, yes. Elara pulled out the photographs. But I've got something you'll want to see. His eyes widened as he flipped through the images. Where did you get these? Broke into a Hale refinery 3 days ago. These are incident reports he's been falsifying. Cross-reference them with what got filed with the safety board, you'll see the pattern. The journalist, his badge said his name was Silas Green, looked up. This is explosive, if verified. I can verify every single page. Give me 30 minutes and access to your archives. Silas studied her. If I publish this, Hale will sue us into oblivion. Not if Inspector Cross confirms it first. That's why I need you to get this to him. Why would he listen to me? Because you're press. You have credibility I don't. And because if you publish this alongside his investigation, it becomes too big for Hale to bury. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then, come with me. He led her inside through a newsroom that smelled of coffee and cigarette smoke into a cluttered office. Show me everything, he said. For the next 4 hours, Elara laid it all out. The incident reports, Marcus's notebook, the testimony from workers, the pattern of falsified records and ignored complaints. Silas took notes, asked sharp questions, cross-referenced facts. Finally, he sat back. This is, if this holds up, this is the biggest corruption story in a decade. Will you print it? Not yet. If I print before Cross investigates, Hale claims it's fabricated. His lawyers tie us up in courts. The story dies. Silas tapped his pen. But if I can get this to Cross, let him confirm it independently, then publish alongside his official findings. Then it's fact, not accusation, Elara finished. Exactly. Silas stood. I know someone in Cross's office, clerk who owes me a favor. I can get these photos and your testimony to Cross without going through official channels. How long? 2 days? Maybe 3? Elara felt something unclench in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Silas looked at her seriously. Hale's going to come after you harder than before. You understand that? I've understood that for a year. No, I don't think you do. Silas pulled out a folder, showed her a newspaper clipping. 3 months ago, a warehouse supervisor tried to organize workers at one of Hale's properties. Fell down the stairs, broke his neck, ruled accidental. Elara's blood ran cold. 2 weeks after that,
a journalist friend of mine, started investigating Hale's business practices.
Got mugged walking home. Lost his notes, his contacts, his will to pursue the story. Silas's expression was grim. Adrian Hale doesn't just destroy careers. He destroys people, and you've pushed him further than anyone ever has. Then I'd better not stop pushing, Elara said. Silas smiled despite himself. You're either the bravest person I've met or the most suicidal. Little of both. Where are you staying? Elara hesitated. Look, you can't go back to wherever you were. Hale's men are in the capital. I've seen them asking questions. You need somewhere safe until Cross acts. Silas scribbled an address. My sister runs a boarding house for students. She'll keep you hidden. I can't pay. Consider it an investment in the story. He handed her the address. Go, stay quiet. Let me work the political channels. When Cross is ready to move, you'll be the key witness he needs. Elara took the address. Why are you helping me? Silas's expression darkened. Because 20 years ago, my father worked in a Hale factory. And 20 years ago, he died when a boiler exploded because safety inspections were ignored. He met her eyes. I've been waiting a long time for someone with the guts to actually challenge him. Don't make me regret betting on you. The boarding house was in a university district, full of students and noise and life. Silas's sister, a woman named Ruth, gave Elara a room and asked no questions. For 2 days, Elara waited. She watched out her window as the city moved below. Read the newspapers, looking for any sign of movement. Wondered if Clara and the others were safe, if the evidence gathering was continuing, if Hale had retaliated. On the 3rd day, Silas appeared at her door. Cross got the evidence, he said without preamble. He's moving up his investigation timeline, leaving for your city in 2 days instead of 6 weeks. Elara felt her heart race. Did he say anything about, he wants to meet you, tonight? Unofficial conversation, off the record. Silas handed her a card with an address. Be there at 8. Come alone. That night, Elara stood outside a private club in the government district. The doorman checked her name against a list, then led her through wood-paneled halls to a private room. Inspector General Nathaniel Cross was younger than she expected, maybe 40, with graying temples and the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen too much to be fooled easily. Miss Vance? He said, standing. Thank you for coming. Thank you for seeing me. Sit, please. He gestured to a chair. I've reviewed the evidence you provided. It's compelling, disturbing, but also incomplete. Elara's stomach sank. What do you mean? I mean that while these photographs prove falsified safety reports at one facility, Duke Hale will argue it's an isolated incident, a rogue supervisor perhaps acting without his knowledge. Cross leaned forward. To bring charges against Hale himself, I need proof of systematic, deliberate corruption. I need to show that he knew about the violations and chose profit over safety. He did know. He had to. Proving it is different. Cross pulled out a map. I'm inspecting 6 Hale properties over the next 3 weeks. If I find consistent patterns of violations, falsified records, and willful negligence, then we have a case. But I need someone on the inside. Someone who knows where to look, what to look for. I'll do it, Elara said immediately. You're wanted for violating your release. The moment you return to the city, you'll be arrested. Then get me immunity, or protection, or something. Cross shook his head. I can't do that until after the investigation concludes. My authority doesn't extend to overriding local warrants. So what are you saying? I'm saying that if you help me, you'll be operating outside the law. And if we fail, you'll face charges not just for violating your release, but for breaking and entering, theft, possibly more. His expression was serious. I'm asking you to risk everything on the chance that I can find enough evidence to make it stick. Elara thought about Anna and James in custody, about Clara and Marcus and everyone risking their lives to fight, about 16 bodies in a warehouse and a 10-year-old stitching buttons. I've already risked everything, she said. What's a little more? Cross studied her, then nodded slowly. All right, here's how this works. I'll conduct official inspections of Hale's properties, but I'll also need you to guide me to the evidence they'll try to hide. Hidden files, tampered equipment, workers willing to testify. When do we start? I arrive in your city in 48 hours. You need to be there, ready to move. He pulled out a sealed envelope. This is a letter explaining your role as an informal consultant to my investigation. It won't protect you from arrest, but it might buy you credibility if things go wrong. Elara took the envelope, feeling the weight of what she was committing to. One more thing, Cross said. Duke Hale is extremely well connected, politically, financially, socially. The moment I start asking questions, he'll know. And he'll use every resource at his disposal to obstruct my investigation. Meaning? Meaning he'll come after you harder than before. He'll paint you as a liar, a criminal, someone with a vendetta. He'll try to discredit everything you say. Cross's gaze was steady. Can you handle that? I've been handling it for a year. This will be worse. Then I'll handle worse. Cross smiled grimly. I believe you will. All right, Miss Vance, let's bring down an empire. And Elara traveled back to the city in Silas's personal carriage, hidden under a tarp in the cargo section. When they arrived at nightfall, she slipped out into familiar streets that suddenly felt more dangerous than ever. Clara met her at a prearranged location, eyes wide. You actually got to Cross? Better. He wants me to help with the investigation. Elara filled her in quickly. Clara's expression shifted from relief to alarm. Hale knows something's happening. Security's been doubled at all his properties. 3 more workers were arrested yesterday for conspiracy. And there's word he's bringing in outside muscle, enforcers from the capital. Then we move fast. Elara pulled out the map Cross had given her. He's inspecting the main warehouse first, tomorrow afternoon. I need to be there before him, make sure the workers who can testify are ready. That warehouse is locked down tight. You'll never get in. I'll get in. Elara's jaw set. I've gotten this far. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, 5 stories of brick and steel. Elara stood in the shadows across the street, studying the entrances. Guards at every door. Cameras on the corners. Hale had turned it into a fortress. There's a loading dock on the east side, Marcus said beside her. He'd insisted on coming despite Elara's protests. 3rd shift uses it between midnight and 4. Security's lighter then. How light? 2 guards instead of 6. Still not great odds. There's another option, Marcus continued. Maintenance tunnels. Run under the warehouse for the steam pipes. They're old, barely used. I worked down there once. How do we access them? Through the adjacent building. Condemned factory. Should be empty. Should be. They moved through the dark streets, Elara's nerves singing with tension. The condemned factory was exactly as decrepit as promised. Broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, the smell of rot and rust. Marcus led her to a basement access point, pried open the rusted grate. Once we're in the tunnels, it's about 200 yards to the warehouse basement. But it's tight, dark, and if we get caught down there... I know. Elara climbed into the hole. Let's move. The tunnels were a nightmare of steam pipes and condensation, barely tall enough to crouch in. Water dripped from overhead, and the darkness was absolute except for Marcus's dim flashlight. They crawled for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Then Marcus stopped. This is it. Access panel above us. Elara looked up. A rusted hatch, secured with a simple bolt. Marcus worked it loose. The hatch creaked open. They climbed into the warehouse basement. Rows of storage, boxes stacked to the ceiling, dim emergency lighting. Worker testimonies are kept in the administrative office, 2nd floor, Marcus whispered. Original complaints, incident reports, everything that didn't make it to official channels. Let's go. They moved through the basement, sticking to the shadows, avoiding the main corridors. The stairs to the 2nd floor were exposed. Elara waited, watching for patrol patterns. 2 guards passed every 5 minutes like clockwork. When the next patrol passes, we have 4.5 minutes to get up, get the files, and get back, Elara said. That's not enough time. It has to be. The patrol passed. They moved. Up the stairs, down the hallway, into the administrative office. Marcus worked on the lock while Elara kept watch. The door clicked open. Inside, filing cabinets lined the walls. Marcus went straight to the one marked Personnel. Grievances. Here. He started pulling files. These are the original complaints. Everything workers filed before Hale's lawyers got involved. Elara photographed them as fast as she could, her hands shaking. 3 minutes. 4.
Footsteps in this hallway. Elara and Marcus froze. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A voice. Thought I heard something. Another voice. Probably rats. This whole place is falling apart. Should check anyway. The door handle turned. Elara looked at Marcus, saw the same panic in his eyes. They were trapped. The door opened, and standing there, backlit by the hallway lights, was Adrian Hale himself. He looked at Elara, and his expression didn't change, like he'd been expecting her. "Hello, Miss Vance," he said calmly. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Elara's hand moved instinctively to the knife at her belt, but Adrian raised a hand in a gesture that was almost casual. "Please don't. That would just make this messier than it needs to be." He stepped into the office, and 2 security guards materialized behind him. "Marcus, you're disappointing. I had such high hopes for you after your accident. Thought you'd learned to be grateful for steady employment." Marcus's jaw clenched. Grateful for scars? For working with equipment you refuse to fix? For having a job at all in a competitive market? Adrian's tone was almost gentle, which made it worse. "But we can discuss your ingratitude later. Right now, I'm more interested in Miss Vance." He looked at her with something like curiosity. "You're remarkably persistent. Prison didn't teach you caution. Running from my guards didn't teach you limits. What exactly will it take?" "For you to stop destroying people," Elara said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Destroying?" Adrian laughed. "I employ 15,000 people across 6 provinces. I've built infrastructure, created opportunity, contributed more to the economic growth of this region than any 3 noble houses combined. But because some accidents happen, because business involves difficult choices, I'm a villain in your little morality play. 16 people died because you locked the exits. 16 people died because of an electrical fire that investigators ruled accidental." Adrian's expression hardened. "You keep clinging to that narrative, but the facts don't support it." "The facts you buried," Elara shot back. "The reports you falsified. The witnesses you threatened into silence." "Allegedly." Adrian glanced at the files Marcus was holding. "What's that? More stolen property? Because breaking and entering, theft of confidential business records? Those are serious crimes, Miss Vance. Add them to your existing violations, and you're looking at 5 years minimum." Elara felt the trap closing. He'd known she'd come. Had been waiting. "Unless," Adrian continued, "we come to an arrangement." "I'm not making deals with you." "Then you're a fool." He stepped closer. "Here's what's going to happen. Inspector General Cross arrives tomorrow. He'll conduct his investigation, and he'll find exactly what I want him to find. Facilities in compliance, workers satisfied, safety protocols being followed. Because I've had months to prepare for this, and I'm very good at preparing. He'll talk to workers. They'll tell him the truth." "Will they?" Adrian smiled. "The ones brave enough to speak have already been arrested for various infractions. The ones still employed understand that cooperation means keeping their jobs. And the ones foolish enough to lie to an inspector will find themselves unemployed and unemployable throughout the province." Marcus spoke up. "You can't threaten everyone. I don't have to threaten. I just have to make the alternative clear." Adrian turned back to Elara. "Here's my offer. You disappear. Leave the city, leave the province, and never speak my name again. In return, I drop those charges against you, release your friends from custody, and even make a generous donation to worker safety initiatives in your name. Generous donation from money made exploiting those same workers. Money that will actually improve conditions, rather than just generating headlines." Adrian's patience was thinning. "I'm offering you a way out, Miss Vance. A chance to claim victory and walk away alive. Take it." Elara thought about Cross, about Silas, about the evidence still hidden in her jacket, about Clara and Anna and everyone counting on her. "No," she said. Adrian's expression went cold. "Then you'll rot in a cell for the next 5 years, and everyone who helped you will join you, starting with Marcus here." "You can't prove we were doing anything wrong." "I can prove you broke into my warehouse. That's enough." Adrian gestured to the guards. "Take them." The guards moved forward, and then the fire alarm went off. The sound was deafening, piercing. Red lights began strobing throughout the building. Adrian spun toward the door. "What the hell?" More alarms. Then the sprinkler system activated, water cascading from the ceiling. In the confusion, Elara grabbed Marcus and pulled him toward the back of the office. There had to be another exit, a window, something. "Stop them!" Adrian shouted. But the guards were dealing with the water, the noise, the chaos. Elara found a window, wrenched it open. Fire escape on the other side. "Go!" she yelled to Marcus. They climbed out onto the metal grating, started descending. Below, she could see workers evacuating the building, flooding into the street. And among them, she spotted Clara, holding what looked like a jury-rigged incendiary device. The girl had set off the alarm. Created the distraction. Elara could have kissed her. They reached the ground level, merged with the evacuating workers, and disappeared into the crowd before Hale's security could organize pursuit. 3 blocks away, they stopped in an alley to catch their breath. "That was too close," Marcus gasped. "But we got the files." Elara pulled out the camera, checking. The photos were intact. "This is what Cross needs." Clara appeared, grinning despite the danger. "Did you see his face?" Hale looked like he was going to explode. "He'll retaliate," Elara said. "Hard. We need to move fast." "Already on it." Clara handed her a newspaper, special evening edition. Silas published a preliminary story, Inspector General to probe Duke Hale's business practices. It hit the streets an hour ago. Elara scanned the article. It was careful, didn't make specific allegations, but it laid out the questions Cross would be asking, and more importantly, it made the investigation public. Hale couldn't bury this quietly anymore. "Where's Cross staying?" Marcus asked. "The Grand Harbor Hotel. But it'll be crawling with Hale's people. Then we don't go to him." Elara thought fast. "We bring the evidence to his first inspection site. Make sure he can't miss it." They spent the rest of the night preparing. Clara printed pamphlets, copies of the most damning photographs, testimonies from workers, side-by-side comparisons of real incident reports versus the falsified versions Hale had filed. Marcus contacted workers willing to testify, gave them the schedule of Cross's inspections, made sure they knew where to be and when. Elara coordinated it all, running on adrenaline and desperation. By dawn, they had a plan. Cross's first inspection was at the textile mill at 9 in the morning. They'd make sure he saw everything Hale wanted to hide. The textile mill was already swarming with activity when Elara arrived at 8:30. Hale's people were everywhere. Managers in suits, security guards watching the entrances, even what looked like a public relations team setting up near the front gate. They were staging it, making it look perfect for the inspector. Elara watched from across the street, Marcus beside her. "We'll never get inside," Marcus said. "They've locked it down completely." "We don't need inside. We need the workers." Elara spotted a group of mill employees gathering at the side entrance. "Come on." They crossed the street, approaching carefully. One of the workers, a woman Elara recognized from the pamphlets Clara had been distributing, saw them, and her eyes widened. "You're her. The one from the trial." "Yes, and I need your help." Elara pulled out the photographs. "Inspector Cross is coming. When he talks to you, show him these. Tell him what really happens here." The woman looked at the photos, then at the security guards 20 feet away. "They'll fire us? Or worse?" "They'll fire you anyway when Cross leaves and they don't need the show anymore," Marcus said quietly. "At least this way, you fight back." Another worker, younger, spoke up. "My sister worked here, died when a loom collapsed. They said it was her fault for not maintaining it properly, but she'd filed 6 complaints about that machine in 2 months." "Then tell Cross that," Elara urged. "Make him hear you." "And if Hale retaliates?" "Then we document that too. Make it part of the case against him." Elara met each of their eyes. "I know I'm asking you to risk everything. I know it's not fair, but it's the only way this stops." The workers exchanged glances. Then the older woman took the photographs. "All right, we'll talk to the inspector, but you need to get out of here. Hale's security is looking for you." Elara nodded and melted back into the crowd gathering to watch the inspection. At precisely 9 o'clock, Inspector General Cross arrived in an official carriage. He was flanked by 2 assistants carrying notebooks and cameras. Professional. Thorough. Adrian Hale met him at the gate, all charm and cooperation. "Inspector Cross, welcome. As you can see, we've prepared full access to our facilities. Nothing to hide." "I appreciate your cooperation, Duke Hale.
Cross's tone was neutral. Shall we begin? They entered the mill, and Elara lost sight of them. For the next 3 hours she waited, watched workers go in and out on their breaks, saw Hale's managers looking increasingly nervous. Then, finally, Cross emerged. His expression was grim. Behind him came 2 of the workers Elara had spoken to, and they were talking, pointing back at the building, showing him photographs. Cross was listening, really listening. Hale followed, his jaw tight, his composure cracking. Complete misrepresentation of standard operating procedures. He was saying, "These workers are confused or they've been coached by agitators. I've seen the equipment myself, Duke Hale," Cross interrupted. "The safety guards that should be in place aren't. The emergency protocols you claim to have are posted on walls but not actually followed. And these incident reports," he held up papers, "don't match the injuries your own medical staff treated. There are explanations. I'm sure there are, and I'll be happy to hear them at the formal inquiry." Cross turned to his assistants. "Document everything, every machine, every violation, every discrepancy. I want this facility's entire operational history subpoenaed." Hale's face went red. "You're overstepping your authority. My authority comes directly from the provincial governor and the Capital Oversight Committee. Unless you'd like to challenge that in front of them," Cross's voice was steel wrapped in silk, "I suggest you cooperate fully, Duke Hale, because right now, this looks very bad for you." Elara felt something sore in her chest. It was working. Cross wasn't being fooled. That afternoon, Cross inspected the chemical refinery where Elara and Marcus had stolen the first batch of evidence. This time, workers were ready. They showed him the equipment Marcus had documented in his notebook, pointed out the safety violations that had caused the chemical burn on Marcus's arms. Hale tried to deflect, to explain, to control the narrative. But Cross wasn't buying it. By evening, word was spreading through the city. The inspector wasn't playing along. He was actually investigating. Silas published another article, this one more pointed. Inspector finds systematic safety failures at Hale Properties. The next morning brought a third inspection, the main warehouse. And this time, Anna and James, released on Cross's orders pending the investigation, were there to testify. Anna stood in front of Cross and showed him the exact spot where her brother had died when poorly maintained equipment had failed. "I filed 17 complaints about that crane," she said, voice shaking but determined. 17. And every single one was ignored until the cable snapped and killed him. Cross examined the crane himself, found the maintenance logs, found the gap between what should have been done and what actually was. His expression grew darker. Hale was losing control of the situation, and everyone could see it. That night, Elara met with Silas in his office. "Cross is preparing formal charges," Silas said. "Negligent homicide, fraud, conspiracy to obstruct safety regulations. If they stick, Hale's looking at criminal penalties, massive fines, possibly prison time." "If they stick," Elara repeated. "Hale's lawyers are already filing motions, claiming the investigation is biased, that Cross exceeded his authority, that the evidence is tainted because of your involvement." Silas looked at her seriously. "They're going to come after you hard, discredit you, paint you as a vengeful agitator who manipulated the entire investigation. Let them try." "Elara, I'm done hiding, done running." She stood. "Hale spent a year trying to silence me. If he wants to drag me through court, fine. Let's see how his story holds up under cross-examination." Silas smiled despite himself. "You know, when you first showed up in my newsroom, I thought you were just another angry idealist who'd burn out fast. I was wrong. I'm still angry. But you're not burning out." He pulled out a folder. "I've been doing my own digging, found something interesting about that warehouse fire, the one where 16 people died." Elara's pulse quickened. "What?" "The official investigation said electrical fault, right? But I found the original fire marshal's report, the one filed before Hale's lawyers got involved." He showed her a document. "Fire marshal concluded the electrical system was fine. The fire started in a storage area where flammable chemicals were kept improperly, and the exits were locked because, and I quote, management policy to prevent theft of materials. He locked them in deliberately. He prioritized protecting his inventory over human lives." Silas's expression was hard. "That's not negligence, Elara. That's something worse." "Can Cross use this?"
Already sent it to him, along with testimony from 3 firefighters who were at the scene and remember things differently than the official report claimed. Silas leaned back. Hale's been very good at burying inconvenient truths. But he buried them, not destroyed them, and now they're all coming up. Over the next week, Cross conducted 8 more inspections. Each one revealed new violations. Each one added to the mountain of evidence. Workers came forward in increasing numbers. People who'd been afraid to speak before saw others testifying and found their courage. Claire's pamphlets circulated throughout the city. People read them in taverns, passed them in factories, discussed them in markets. The narrative was shifting. Adrian Hale, once seen as a pillar of the community, was now being questioned, scrutinized, doubted, and he was panicking. Elara saw it in the newspapers. Hale issued statement after statement, defending his record, attacking his accusers, claiming political persecution, but each statement sounded more desperate than the last. Then came the workers' strike. It started at the textile mill. 20 workers walked out, demanding better safety conditions. Within 2 days, it spread to 3 other facilities. Hale threatened to fire everyone, brought in replacement workers. But the replacement saw the conditions and walked out too. Within a week, half of Hale's workforce was on strike. Production ground to a halt, contracts went unfulfilled. Partners started asking questions. Elara watched it unfold with something like awe. She'd started this fight alone, armed with nothing but truth and anger. Now thousands of people were fighting alongside her. Cross called a press conference on the 10th day of his investigation. The room was packed. Journalists, city officials, workers, even some of Hale's business associates. Adrian Hale sat in the front row, flanked by expensive lawyers, his expression carved from stone. Cross stood at the podium, formal and severe. After extensive investigation into Duke Adrian Hale's business operations, I have found systematic violations of safety regulations, falsification of official reports, and willful negligence resulting in worker deaths and injuries across multiple facilities. The room erupted in noise. Cross waited for it to settle. I am recommending criminal charges for negligent homicide, fraud, and obstruction of safety enforcement. Additionally, I am recommending the immediate suspension of operating licenses for 6 facilities pending comprehensive safety overhauls. More chaos. Hale's lawyers were on their feet, shouting objections. Cross ignored them. Furthermore, I am recommending a full audit of Duke Hale's business empire to determine the scope of similar violations in other provinces. This is not an isolated incident. This is systematic exploitation masquerading as legitimate enterprise.
Tudo mudanças.
He looked directly at Hale. You built an empire on the backs of workers you treated as disposable. You prioritized profit over human life, and you used your wealth and influence to escape accountability. Cross's voice was cold. That ends today. The room exploded. Elara, watching from the back, felt tears she didn't expect. Not of sadness, of vindication. She'd done it, actually done it. Afterwards, as the crowd dispersed, Silas found her. You know Hale's going to fight this, he said. Appeals, delays, legal maneuvers. This could drag on for years. I know. But the truth is out there now. He can't bury it again. Elara watched Hale storm out of the building, surrounded by lawyers. Even if he escapes prison, his reputation is destroyed. His business is collapsing. Workers are organizing. He's lost. You won, Silas said simply. Elara thought about that, about the cost of winning. Her family exiled, months in prison, a year of running and fighting and barely surviving. I survived, she corrected, and sometimes that's the same thing. That night, Clara threw together a celebration in the print shop. Workers, organizers, sympathetic journalists, people who'd been part of this fight gathered to mark the moment. Someone brought cheap wine. Someone else brought bread and cheese. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. Marcus raised a glass. To Elara Vance, who was too stubborn to know when to quit. To Cross, for actually doing his job, Anna added. To everyone brave enough to speak up, Clara said. They drank, and Elara felt the weight of the past year settling onto her shoulders. She'd won this battle, but she also knew, viscerally understood, how easily it could have gone the other way. What will you do now? Clara asked her. Elara thought about her parents in Greymarch, about the promise she'd made to find them. But she also thought about the workers still organizing,
about the reforms that would need to be implemented, about all the other Adrian Hales in the world who needed challenging. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but not run, not hide." "Good," Marcus said, "because we're going to need you. This isn't over. Implementing the reforms Cross recommended, making sure Hale actually faces consequences, protecting workers who testified from retaliation. There's work to do." "Then I guess I'd better stay," Elara said. The next morning, Elara received an unexpected visitor. She was in the boarding house when Margot came up to tell her someone was asking for her. Elara descended the stairs cautiously, half expecting Hale's guards. Instead, she found Lady Cassandra Thorne, the widow who'd first sponsored her testimony to the city council. "Miss Vance," Lady Thorne said, "I believe congratulations are in order." "Thank you for your support, Lady Thorne. Without you, none of this would have happened." The older woman studied her. "I've been watching your fight with interest. You've done something remarkable, challenged entrenched power and actually won." "We haven't won yet. Hale's lawyers will tie this up in courts for years, yes. But public opinion has shifted. Workers are organizing. Other inspectors are starting to look at similar operations throughout the province." Lady Thorne smiled. "You changed the conversation, Miss Vance. That's worth more than any single conviction." Elara didn't know what to say. "I have a proposition," Lady Thorne continued. "I'm funding a new organization, a workers' advocacy group focused on safety reform and labor rights. We need someone to run it. Someone who understands both the elite world and the workers' world. Someone with credibility on both sides. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a platform, resources, institutional support to continue the fight you started." Lady Thorne's expression was serious. "You've proven you can challenge power. Now let's see if you can reform it." Elara looked at this woman. Old money, old privilege, offering to use both in service of change. A year ago, she would have been suspicious, would have seen it as co-option, as the elite trying to control a movement they couldn't crush. But she'd learned something in the past year. Learned that change required multiple approaches, multiple voices, alliances that crossed traditional boundaries. "I'd need autonomy," Elara said. "Real power to make decisions, not just be a figurehead." "Agreed. And workers need to be involved at every level. This can't be about elite reform imposed from above." "That's why I'm asking you, because you understand that." Lady Thorne extended her hand. "What do you say, Miss Vance? Ready to turn your fight into a movement?" Elara thought about Clara and Marcus, about Anna and James, about all the workers who'd risked everything to speak truth. She thought about her parents, who'd wanted her to be safe, to be quiet, to survive by not making waves. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, standing in that ballroom, speaking words that would destroy her comfortable life. And she thought about the woman she'd become, scarred, fierce, unbreakable. "Yes," Elara said, taking Lady Thorne's hand, "let's build something that lasts." 3 weeks later, the Workers' Safety and Rights Coalition held its first public meeting. The hall was packed. Workers from a dozen industries, concerned citizens, even some business owners who recognized that reform was inevitable and wanted to be part of shaping it. Elara stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces. A year ago, she'd been thrown out of a ballroom for challenging power. Now power was being forced to listen. "We're here," she began, "because 16 people died in a warehouse fire. Because a 10-year-old girl stitches buttons instead of going to school. Because workers have been treated as disposable for too long." The room was silent, attentive. Change doesn't happen because one person speaks up. It happens when enough people decide silence is more dangerous than action. Elara's voice grew stronger. "We've proven that the powerful can be challenged. Now we prove they can be reformed." Applause rippled through the hall. Elara laid out the coalition's goals: mandatory safety inspections, worker representation in policy decisions, accountability for violations, support for families affected by workplace deaths. It was ambitious, maybe impossible, but so was everything else she'd accomplished in the past year. After the meeting, as people filed out discussing next steps and organizing efforts, Marcus pulled her aside. "You did it," he said. "Actually built something from all this chaos." "We did it," Elara corrected. "You, Clara, Anna, everyone who testified. Yeah, but you're the one who started it, who refused to quit even when quitting was the smart move. Marcus smiled. My brother would have liked you. He was stubborn too. Elara felt the weight of that. Of all the people this fight had been for, the ones who didn't survive to see this moment. We're doing this for them, she said quietly, making sure their deaths meant something. Then let's make it count. That night, Elara sat in her small room at Margot's boarding house and wrote a letter to her parents. Dear Mother and Father, I know you wanted me to come to Grey March, to start fresh, to leave the fighting behind. And part of me still wants that. The quiet life, the safety, the chance to just exist without battles. But I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I've started something here. Something bigger than me. Workers are organizing. Reforms are being implemented. Power is being challenged in ways it hasn't been in generations. And I need to see it through. I hope you understand. I hope you can forgive me for choosing this instead of safety. But I hope, you raised me to believe some things are worth fighting for. I love you. And maybe someday, when this work is more stable, when I can step back without everything collapsing, I'll come north and we'll build that quiet life together. But not yet. Your stubborn daughter, Elara. She sealed the letter and set it aside to mail in the morning. Then she pulled out the newspaper, latest edition, featuring a long article about Cross's investigation and the charges being brought against Adrian Hale. The article included a photo of her, taken at the coalition meeting. Elara studied her own face, older than a year ago, harder, but also more certain. She'd survived prison, pursuit, violence, betrayal. She'd challenged an empire and lived to tell about it, and now she was building something that might actually last. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Clara stood in the hallway, holding a stack of freshly printed pamphlets. New edition, she said, handing one to Elara. About the coalition, about worker organizing, about the reforms we're pushing for. Elara scanned it. Clara's writing had improved, sharper, more focused. We're distributing these throughout the industrial quarter tomorrow. Thought you might want to come. Absolutely, Clara grinned. Good, because there's already talk of another strike. The dock workers are considering walking out over wage disputes. They're asking if the coalition will support them. Of course we will. Even though it means going up against the shipping companies, they're almost as powerful as Hale was. Then I guess we'll be busy. Elara stood. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, let's just appreciate what we've already done. They walked down to the street together, into the night air that smelled of factory smoke and possibility. The city spread out before them, still harsh, still dangerous, still full of injustice, but also full of people waking up to their power, full of workers refusing to be silent, full of change that couldn't be stopped anymore. Elara looked up at the stars barely visible through the smoke and felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, she'd probably never have that, but purpose, direction. The bone-deep knowledge that she was exactly where she needed to be. Adrian Hale had tried to destroy her for speaking truth. Instead, he'd created someone who couldn't be destroyed, someone who'd turned personal survival into collective power, someone who'd proven that even the mightiest empire could fall if enough people decided to push. And in a city that had once rejected her, in a fight that had nearly killed her, Elara Vance had found exactly what she'd been looking for all along. Not acceptance, not safety, but the fierce, unbreakable certainty that some fights are worth whatever they cost. And she was just getting started. The dock workers' strike started on a Tuesday morning when the sun was barely up and the harbor still smelled of night rain and fish. Elara stood with Clara and Marcus at the edge of the crowd. 300 workers, maybe more, gathered at the main shipping terminal. They'd walked off their shifts at dawn, and now they blocked the entrance, preventing cargo from moving in or out. The shipping companies had called it an illegal work stoppage. The workers called it survival. We're asking for 15% wage increase and mandatory rest periods. The strike leader, a weathered man named Tobias, was explaining to a reporter. We work 16-hour days loading cargo that makes these companies millions. We're just asking for enough to feed our families. Elara watched the crowd, saw the determination mixed with fear. These men had families depending on them. Walking out meant no pay, possible termination, blacklisting from other jobs. But they'd done it anyway.
The coalition's backing them? Marcus asked. Publicly announced it this morning, Elara confirmed. Lady Thorne's lawyers are already filing injunctions against any retaliation, and we've got funds set aside to support striker families. Clara was taking notes, already planning the pamphlet. This is spreading. I'm hearing rumors of textile workers considering similar action. Even some of the refinery workers Marcus knows. Hale's businesses? Some of them, yeah. Turns out when you prove one tyrant can fall, others start looking vulnerable. Clara smiled grimly. You started an avalanche, Elara. Before Elara could respond, shouting erupted from the terminal entrance. Security guards were trying to push through the strikers. Behind them, replacement workers, scabs willing to cross the picket line for the promise of jobs. The crowd surged forward, blocking them. Elara saw Tobias trying to keep things peaceful, urging workers to hold the line but not engage physically. It was working until one of the security guards shoved an older striker, sending him stumbling. Then all restraint broke. Workers surged forward. Guards drew clubs. The replacement workers scattered. We need to stop this, Marcus said, already moving. Elara followed, pushing through the crowd. Tobias, pull them back! But it was chaos now, fists flying, bodies colliding. Someone threw a rock that shattered a window. Then the city guards arrived. 20 men with shields and batons forming a line between strikers and the terminal. Disperse immediately, the captain shouted through a speaking cone. You're in violation of public assembly ordinances. Clear the area or face arrest. The workers didn't move. I'm giving you one final warning. We're not leaving until management agrees to negotiate, Tobias yelled back. The captain gave a signal. The guards advanced. What happened next was brutal and fast. Batons cracking against bodies. Workers fighting back with fists and improvised weapons. Blood on the cobblestones. Elara grabbed Clara and Marcus, pulled them back. We can't help if we're arrested. They retreated to a safe distance and watched the guards systematically break the strike. Watched workers dragged away in chains. Watched Tobias himself taken down by 3 guards and hauled into a police wagon. Within 30 minutes, the terminal entrance was clear. The strike was broken. That afternoon, Elara stood in the coalition office, a modest space Lady Thorne had rented above a bookshop, and faced a room full of angry, scared organizers. They arrested 47 people, Anna reported, her voice shaking, including Tobias and most of the strike leadership. The charges are inciting riot, destruction of property, assault on city officials. That's insane, Clara protested. The guards attacked first. Doesn't matter. The shipping companies are calling it a violent uprising. They're demanding maximum sentences. Anna slumped in her chair. We lost. We haven't lost, Elara said, but even she could hear the doubt in her voice. Haven't we? James stood, pacing. We backed this strike, put the coalition's reputation behind it, and it ended with workers beaten and jailed. How is that not a loss? Elara didn't have a good answer. The room fell into defeated silence. Then Marcus spoke up. What if we make this bigger? Everyone looked at him. The dock strike failed because it was isolated, easy to crush. But what if it wasn't isolated? Marcus pulled out a map of the city. There are strikes brewing at 4 other locations. What if they all walked out at once? What if we coordinated a citywide action that the companies can't break with a few dozen guards? You're talking about a general strike, Elara said. I'm talking about showing them they can't arrest everyone, can't beat everyone into submission. Marcus's eyes were fierce. The dock workers lost because they were alone. Let's make sure nobody has to stand alone again. Anna was shaking her head. A general strike is massive, complex. We'd need thousands of workers coordinated across dozens of facilities. We've got Clara's distribution network for pamphlets. We've got connections to organizers in every major workplace. We've got Lady Thorne's money to support families during the stoppage. Marcus looked at Elara. We've got you. The woman who brought down Adrian Hale. Hale's not down yet, Elara pointed out. His trial doesn't start for another 2 months. He's still operating, still has influence, which is why we need to act now, before he can rebuild, before the momentum we've built dies out. Marcus planted his hands on the table. This is the moment, Elara. We either push forward or watch everything we've fought for crumble. Elara looked around the room, saw fear, exhaustion, but also stubborn hope. How long would we need to organize it, she asked. 2 weeks? maybe 3. Coordinate with existing organizers, distribute information, prepare workers for the risk. Do it, Elara decided. But we do it smart. No violence, no property destruction, just workers refusing to work until their demands are met. Make it peaceful, make it visible, and make it impossible to ignore. They worked 18-hour days for the next 2 weeks. Clara printed thousands of pamphlets explaining the demands, fair wages, safe conditions, the right to organize without retaliation. They were distributed in factories, warehouses, mills, construction sites, everywhere workers gathered. Marcus coordinated with organizers across the city, synchronizing the timing, making sure everyone understood the plan. Anna worked with Lady Thorne to establish support funds, money to help families survive without wages during the strike. Elara became the public face of it. She gave interviews to sympathetic journalists like Silas. She met with workers, answered questions, calmed fears, and every day she wondered if they were about to make a catastrophic mistake. The general strike was set for a Monday morning at dawn. The night before, Elara couldn't sleep. She sat in her room at Margot's boarding house, staring at the ceiling, running through everything that could go wrong. What if workers didn't show up? What if the companies brought in enough replacement labor to keep operating? What if the city guards came down even harder than they had at the docks? What if people died because of her choices? A knock on her door pulled her from spiraling thoughts. It was Silas, looking rumpled and worried. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing her a newspaper. Tomorrow's early edition. The headline read, "Workers Across City Plan Unprecedented Strike Action." Below it was a photo of Elara speaking at a workers' meeting and an article laying out the coalition's demands. "You're giving them advance warning," Elara said. "I'm making it news." "Which means the companies can't crack down quietly. The whole city will be watching." Silas sat down. "You know this is going to get ugly, right? Even if it stays peaceful, the economic disruption alone, businesses will lose millions. They're going to come after you with everything they have." "I know. And you're doing it anyway. People are dying in factories. Children are working instead of learning. Workers are being treated like machinery that breaks and gets replaced." Elara met his eyes. "If making that stop means I become the most hated person in the province, I can live with that." Silas smiled slightly. "You've changed since that council hearing. You were angry then. Now you're still angry, just better at channeling it." "Fair enough." He stood. "Good luck tomorrow. I'll be there covering it. Hopefully I'll be writing about a peaceful demonstration and not a bloodbath. You and me both." Dawn came cold and gray. Elara dressed in practical clothes, work pants, sturdy boots, a coat that had seen better days. She wasn't trying to look like one of the elite anymore. She was one of the workers now, by choice and necessity. She met Clara and Marcus at the central square at 5 in the morning. The square was already filling with people, workers from every industry, every neighborhood. They came quietly, without fanfare, but they came. By 6 o'clock, there were thousands. By 7, the entire square was packed. Elara stood on a makeshift platform, just some crates stacked together, and looked out at the sea of faces. She'd never seen anything like it. "Are you ready?" Clara asked. Elara's hands were shaking. "No, but let's do it anyway." She stepped forward, and the crowd quieted. 3 weeks ago," Elara began, her voice carrying across the square, "dock workers struck for fair wages. They were beaten and arrested. The companies called them criminals. The city called them troublemakers." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, but they were none of those things. They were people asking for dignity, for the right to work without being destroyed by it. Elara's voice grew stronger. "And today, we're all asking for the same thing." Cheers erupted. "Today we're not just dock workers or mill workers or factory workers. We're all workers, and we're all demanding change." She pulled out the list of demands. Safe working conditions, fair wages, the right to organize without fear, an end to child labor, accountability for deaths caused by negligence. More cheers, louder now. "The companies will call this illegal. They'll threaten us with arrest, with termination, with blacklisting. But they can't arrest all of us. They can't replace all of us. And they can't ignore all of us." Elara raised her fist. "Today, we show them that workers aren't disposable. We're the ones who make this city run. And without us, everything stops." The crowd roared, and then, as coordinated as a military operation, they dispersed. To their workplaces, to
to the gates and entrances, where they stood in peaceful lines and refused to work. Elara stayed in the square with Clara and Marcus, watching reports come in. The textile mills, shut down. Not a single loom running. The docks, completely silent. No cargo moving. The factories, empty. Assembly lines stopped. The refineries, the warehouses, the construction sites, all of them, quiet. The city was holding its breath. By noon, the companies were panicking. Representatives showed up at the square demanding to speak with strike leadership. Elara met them in the coalition office, with Lady Thorne beside her and Silas taking notes. The company's spokesman was a man named Hargrove, sleek and expensive in his tailored suit. "This is economic terrorism," he said without preamble. "You're costing businesses millions in lost productivity, and you've been costing workers their lives for decades," Elara interrupted. "We can argue about who's the real terrorist, or we can negotiate." Hargrove's jaw tightened. "We're not negotiating with extortionists." "Then you're not getting your workforce back." Elara pulled out the demands list. "These aren't unreasonable. Safety equipment, reasonable hours, living wages. These are things workers in other provinces already have." "Other provinces don't have your particular brand of rabble-rousing," Lady Thorne spoke up, her voice cool and aristocratic. "Mr. Hargrove, I suggest you adjust your tone. These demands have my full support, and I'm prepared to use my considerable influence to ensure they're taken seriously." Hargrove looked at her with barely concealed contempt. "You're a traitor to your class." "I'm a traitor to exploitation masquerading as enterprise." Lady Thorne smiled. "Now, shall we discuss terms, or shall I start contacting my friends in the provincial government about investigating your business practices?" The negotiations lasted 3 days. 3 days of workers maintaining the strike, of companies losing money, of the city watching to see who would break first. Elara barely slept. She ran between meeting sites, coordinated with strike captains, addressed workers who were scared or wavering. On the second day, the companies tried to bring in replacement workers. The strikers stood firm, peacefully blocking entrances but not engaging violently. The city guards were called, but faced with thousands of peaceful protesters and the press documenting everything, they held back. On the third day, Adrian Hale made his move. He'd been quiet since Cross's investigation, dealing with his own legal problems. But now he saw an opportunity. He published an open letter in every newspaper. "These strikes are the work of agitators and criminals seeking to destroy legitimate business. Miss Elara Vance, a convicted criminal with a personal vendetta against me, is manipulating honest workers for her own agenda. I call on the authorities to arrest the strike organizers and restore order before our economy is irreparably damaged." It was a calculated attack, painting Elara as the villain, the workers as dupes. Silas showed her the letter over breakfast. "He's trying to make this about you instead of the issues," Silas said. "Trying to discredit the whole movement by discrediting you." Elara read it twice, feeling the familiar anger build. But she'd learned something in the past year. Anger without strategy was just noise. "Let him," she said finally. "What?" "Let him make this about me. Let him attack my character, my motives, whatever he wants." Elara stood. "Because when workers win these demands anyway, when we prove that this isn't about me, it's about them, his attack becomes meaningless." "That's risky. Everything we're doing is risky." Elara grabbed her coat. "Come on, we've got a strike to win." The breakthrough came that afternoon. The shipping companies, hemorrhaging money from 3 days of stopped cargo, broke ranks with the others and agreed to negotiate directly. They offered a 10% wage increase and improved safety protocols. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Tobias, released from jail pending trial, stood before the dock workers and presented the offer. "It's not 15%, he said, but it's more than we had yesterday, and they've agreed to recognize our right to organize without retaliation." The workers voted. By a narrow margin, they accepted. The dock strike ended, and suddenly the other companies faced a choice: negotiate or stand alone against the rest of the strike. One by one, they came to the table. The textile mills agreed to end child labor and implement safety standards. The factories agreed to reasonable work hours and overtime pay. The refineries agreed to proper safety equipment and regular inspections. It took another week of negotiations. There were setbacks, arguments, moments when it almost collapsed. But in the end, they won. Not everything they'd asked for. Compromises had been made, concessions given, but workers had stood up, held firm, and forced powerful companies to bend. Elara stood in the central square 2 weeks after the strike began and read the agreements aloud to a crowd of thousands. When she finished, the roar was deafening. People crying, hugging, celebrating. Marcus grabbed her in a crushing embrace. "We did it! We actually did it!" Clara was wiping tears. "My father would have been proud to see this." Anna just smiled, tired but genuine. Elara looked out at the crowd, workers who'd risked everything, who'd stood together despite fear, who'd proven that collective action could challenge even entrenched power, and felt something shift in her chest. This was what she'd been fighting for all along. Not just exposing corruption, not just punishing wrongdoers, but building something new, something better. That night, as the celebrations continued in the streets, Elara slipped away to write another letter. "Dear Mother and Father, we won. I know that's a strange thing to say when I'm still a fugitive, when my name is still mud among the elite, when half the city probably hates me. But we won something that matters. Workers across the city now have protections they didn't have before. Children are going back to school instead of factories. People are organizing without fear of immediate retaliation. It's not perfect, it's not complete, but it's real change, and I'm starting to understand what you meant all those years ago when you said I was stubborn. You weren't criticizing. You were warning me that once I committed to something, I wouldn't be able to walk away. You were right. I can't walk away from this. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because there are too many fights left, too many people who need someone willing to stand up. But I want you to know I'm safe, I'm healthy, and I'm exactly where I need to be. I hope someday you can be proud of that. With love, Elara." She sealed the letter and set it aside. Then she pulled out the other letter she needed to write, the harder one. "Adrian Hale, you tried to destroy me for speaking truth. You used your wealth, your power, your influence to grind me into dust. You failed, not because I'm special or invincible, but because you made one critical mistake. You thought breaking me would break the movement. You thought if you could discredit me, silence me, imprison me, everyone else would fall in line. Instead, you showed them exactly why they needed to fight. Your trial starts next month. You'll have expensive lawyers, sympathetic judges, every advantage money can buy. You might even escape prison. But you've already lost the thing that mattered most to you, your reputation, your empire, your unchallenged authority. Workers aren't afraid of you anymore. Companies can't exploit them the way they used to. And the system you built to protect yourself is crumbling. I hope it was worth it. All the deaths, all the suffering, all the people you destroyed for profit. I hope when you're alone with your thoughts, you can live with what you've done. I know I can live with what I've done. Can you say the same?" Elara Vance. She didn't send that letter. Just writing it was enough. Adrian Hale's trial began 6 weeks later. Elara sat in the gallery every day, watching as Cross presented evidence, watching workers testify about conditions they'd endured, watching the defense lawyers try to spin negligence as unfortunate accidents. Hale himself never testified, just sat there in his expensive suit, expression carefully neutral, while his world was dissected. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict came on a gray Tuesday afternoon. Guilty on 12 counts of criminal negligence. Guilty on 8 counts of fraud. Guilty on 4 counts of obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in prison and ordered restitution payments to families of workers killed or injured in his facilities. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Elara just sat there, feeling strangely empty. She'd won. Actually, completely won. But it didn't feel like she'd imagined. There was no triumphant rush, no sense of complete vindication. Just tired satisfaction and the knowledge that the work wasn't over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed her. "Miss Vance, how does it feel to see Hale convicted? Do you think justice was served? What's next for the Workers' Coalition?" Elara held up her hand for quiet. Today, 16 families whose loved ones died in Duke Hale's facilities finally have acknowledgement that those deaths weren't accidents. That's what matters. She paused. As for what's next, we keep working. This verdict doesn't fix everything. Workers still face exploitation. Safety regulations still need enforcement. There are 100 other fights waiting. Will you be leading those fights? Elara thought about that.
About the girl who'd stood in a ballroom a year and a half ago and said words that destroyed her life. About the woman she'd become through prison, pursuit, strikes, and victory. "I'll be doing my part," she said finally, "but these fights don't belong to me. They belong to every worker who's had enough of being disposable. I'm just trying to help." That evening, Elara stood on the roof of the coalition office and watched the sun set over the city. Clara found her there. "You okay?" Clara asked. "Yeah, just processing. Big day." "Biggest." Elara looked at the younger woman. "Thank you for everything. The fire alarm at the warehouse, the pamphlets, the organizing, none of this happens without you." Clara shrugged, embarrassed. "I was just printing words you gave me." "You were building a movement that's bigger than words." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "With you, I mean. The coalition's established. Workers are organizing, reforms are being implemented. You could step back if you wanted. Go find your parents. Have that quiet life." Elara considered that. The appeal of Grey March, of safety, of letting someone else carry the weight. "I could," she agreed, "but I think I'd go crazy. Sitting still isn't really my thing anymore." Clara laughed. "Fair enough. Besides, there's too much left to do. We won these reforms in one city. What about the rest of the province? What about enforcement and accountability?" Elara's eyes gleamed. "We started something, Clara. I want to see how far it can go." "Then I guess we're stuck together." "Guess so." They watched the city lights flicker on as darkness fell. Somewhere down there, workers were going home to families, knowing they had protections they'd fought for, knowing they had voices that couldn't be silenced anymore. And somewhere in a prison cell, Adrian Hale was learning that money couldn't buy him out of consequences. It wasn't a perfect ending. The world wasn't fixed. Injustice still existed. But it was progress. Real, measurable progress. And for now, that was enough. 6 months later, Elara stood on a train platform with a small bag and a ticket to Grey March. The coalition was stable now, with dedicated staff and growing membership. Her role was less critical. She could step away for a while. Marcus and Anna had taken over day-to-day operations. Clara was running the publication arm, her pamphlets now reaching 3 provinces. Lady Thorne was leveraging her political connections to push for legislative reforms. They didn't need Elara the way they had at the beginning, which meant she could finally make good on a promise. The train ride north took 2 days. Elara watched the landscape change from industrial sprawl to farmland to forests, feeling the tension slowly drain from her shoulders. When she arrived in Grey March, it was late afternoon. The town was smaller than she'd imagined, quieter. She found her parents' address, a modest apartment above a tailor shop, and stood outside for a full minute, gathering courage. Then she knocked. Her mother opened the door. For a moment, neither of them moved, just stared at each other. Then her mother pulled her into a crushing embrace. "You came," her mother whispered. "I'm sorry it took so long." Her father appeared, and then she was hugging both of them, crying in a way she hadn't let herself cry through everything else. They sat in the small kitchen, and Elara told them everything: the prison, the organizing, the strikes, the trial. Her mother listened with a mixture of pride and terror. Her father just shook his head. "You really couldn't just let it go, could you?" "Would you have?" Elara challenged gently. He smiled. "No, I suppose not." They talked until late, about their new life in Grey March, about the business they were slowly rebuilding, about neighbors and the quiet rhythm of small-town life. It sounded peaceful, safe, and Elara felt the pull of it, the temptation to stay, to leave the fighting behind. But she also felt the restlessness already building. "How long are you staying?" her mother asked. "A few weeks, maybe a month." Elara took her mother's hand. "I need this. Need to remember what I'm fighting for. Need to be with family. But you're going back," her father finished. "Yeah, I am." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I know. I've known since you were a girl that you'd never be satisfied with quiet. I just hoped—" "I know, me too sometimes." Elara squeezed her hand. "But I found something down there. Purpose. People who need what I can do. And I can't walk away from that." "Just promise me you'll be careful," her mother said. "I'll try. And visit more often." "I will." Her father stood, pulled out a bottle of wine he'd been saving. Then let's make the most of the time we have. They drank and talked and laughed, and for a few hours, Elara was just a daughter with her parents, not a revolutionary or an organizer or a symbol, just Elara. And it was exactly what she needed. The month in Grey March passed quietly. Elara helped in her parents' shop, walked the peaceful streets, slept without nightmares for the first time in over a year. She wrote letters to Clara and Marcus, keeping up with coalition news, heard about new organizing efforts in neighboring cities, about workers citing her story as inspiration. It was strange being a symbol, being someone people pointed to and said she fought and won. Because she didn't feel like she'd won everything, just one battle in an endless war. But maybe that was enough. Maybe that's all anyone could do, fight their battle, win what they could, and trust others to carry it forward. On her last night in Grey March, Elara sat with her parents on their small balcony. "You've changed," her mother observed. "Harder, but also more certain," Elara suggested. "I was going to say more yourself." Her mother smiled. "When you were young, you were always searching for where you fit, always trying to be what others expected. Now you just are. Prison will do that to you." It wasn't the prison. It was the choice you made before prison, to speak up when everyone else stayed silent. Her father looked at her seriously. "I was angry at you for that. Angry that you threw away our security for principle. But I was wrong to be angry. You did what needed doing." "It cost us everything," Elara said quietly. "It cost us things. But we're still here, still together. And you gave people hope that power can be challenged." He raised his glass. "I'm proud of you, daughter. Your mother and I both are." Elara felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. That means everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. "When you go back," her mother said, "promise me you'll remember this. Remember that there's peace waiting for you when the fighting gets too hard. That you can always come home." "I promise." The next morning, Elara boarded the train south. Her parents stood on the platform, waving until she was out of sight. Elara settled into her seat and pulled out a notebook, blank pages waiting to be filled. She began writing. The Coalition's expansion plan. Year 2 objectives. 1. Establish satellite offices in 3 additional cities. 2. Train new organizers in peaceful resistance tactics. 3. Push for provincial legislation mandating safety standards. 4. Support workers in industries not yet organized. 5. Document ongoing violations and hold companies accountable. The list grew. So much work ahead. So many fights waiting. But for the first time since standing in that ballroom, Elara felt like she had the tools to fight them. Not just anger or courage, though she had both, but strategy, allies, institutional support, and the knowledge that she wasn't alone. The train carried her south, back to the city where she'd lost everything and found herself, back to the work that would define her life. When Elara walked back into the Coalition office 3 days later, the team was in the middle of a planning session. They looked up, surprised. "You're back early," Clara said. "Couldn't stay away." Elara dropped her bag. "What did I miss?" Marcus grinned. "Marcus, 3 new organizing efforts, 2 companies trying to backslide on agreements, and a request from workers in the capital asking for help setting up their own coalition." "Sounds busy. Sounds like we need you." Elara pulled up a chair. "Then let's get to work." They dove back into it, planning, organizing, fighting the endless battle for dignity and justice. And somewhere in the middle of reviewing complaints and drafting responses, Elara realized something. She was happy, not comfortable, not safe, not living the quiet life her parents had wanted for her, but happy in a bone-deep way that came from doing work that mattered with people she trusted. That evening, as the others filed out and Elara was locking up, she paused at the window. The city spread below, dirty, dangerous, full of injustice that would take generations to root out, but also full of workers standing together, full of voices that wouldn't be silenced, full of people who'd seen what collective action could accomplish and were ready to push further. Adrian Hale was in prison. The worst facilities had been shut down or reformed. Workers had rights they'd fought for and won. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was progress. Real, lasting progress. And Elara Vance,
Merchant's daughter, convicted criminal, revolutionary, had helped make it happen. She'd stood in a ballroom and said 10 words that destroyed her life. And from that destruction, she'd built something that couldn't be destroyed. Not a perfect world, but a world that was fighting to be better. And that, Elara thought as she turned off the lights and headed home through streets she'd learned to navigate in darkness, was worth everything it had cost. The fight wasn't over. It would probably never be over. But she was ready for it, stubborn, scarred, and unbreakable, exactly as she needed to be, exactly as she'd chosen to become. And in a harsh world that tried to grind people down, that choice, to stand up, to fight back, to refuse to be broken, was the most powerful weapon anyone could have. Elara walked through the night, already planning tomorrow's battles, already knowing she'd face them the same way she'd faced everything else. With courage, with allies, and with the absolute certainty that some things were worth fighting for. No matter the cost, no matter how long it took, no matter what.